Breaking off relationships almost always leaves emotional scars and turmoil which do not heal quickly. People handle such situations differently. Some prefer to never see or speak to each other again to avoid reopening fresh wounds, while others remain friends. However, there are instances where ex-lovers are no longer together, but also unable to completely separate due to something shared that cannot be quickly dissolved. In situations where former lovers start new relationships in each other's presence and continue to interact, it can lead to unpredictable outcomes. The story of Ildiko Krajnyak, a successful entrepreneur and owner of a high-end spa salon in California, resembled a fairy tale but ended abruptly and tragically. Initially, there were suggestions of an accident, an attack, or rival machinations, but the truth turned out to be far grimmer. A devastating event befell the successful and attractive woman at the hands of someone she once loved and trusted immensely. Who is Ildiko Krajnyak? Childhood, early years. A girl named Ildiko Krajnyak was born on June 8, 1969, in the city of Miskolc in northeastern Hungary, and was the younger of two children in a middle-class family. Her mother, Juliana, worked as a nurse in the Department of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery, but later, in the 1980s, retrained in aesthetic medicine, which was becoming increasingly popular, and opened her own clinic. The family patriarch, Laszlo Krajnyak, was a simple worker and spent most of his life laboring at a local factory, striving to provide for his family. Ildiko's elder brother, named after their father, was only a few years older than her. From early childhood, the siblings got along well and were nearly inseparable. Following in their father's footsteps, her brother gained an engineering degree and worked at the same machine-building plant for a while before starting his own small business in their hometown. Ildiko was naturally creative and imaginative from childhood, feeling constrained not only in Miskolc, but also in conservative Hungary. She dreamed of traveling the world, seeing other cities and countries, establishing her business, achieving success and recognition, and breaking free from the ordinariness in which her family lived. After finishing school, young Krajnyak enrolled in a medical college and later obtained a license to work in aesthetic cosmetology. Inspired by her mother's example, she aimed to achieve more and become a true star in her field. Her first success came when she was just 20 years old. The budding specialist skillfully built her career, independently developing a business plan and strategy. She quickly built up a client base and started earning decent money by her city's standards. Ildiko constantly strived to learn and improve her skills, staying up to date with all the latest innovations in cosmetology, aesthetic medicine, and the beauty industry at large. However, she understood that her opportunities at home were limited and that, as a specialist, she would soon reach their ceiling. To move forward, she would need to find a place that offered more chances to fully realize her potential. After earning a bachelor's degree in medical aesthetics, the ambitious young Krajnyak decided to take action. Moving to the USA, the ambitions of this young woman were enviable, though few believed she would truly embark on such radical changes, as Ildiko was very close to her family and seemed unlikely to ever leave her parents. However, in the summer of 1992, shortly after celebrating her 23rd birthday, Ildiko decided to realize her lifelong dream and moved across the ocean to the United States of America. Chasing the American dream, the determined Hungarian gambled everything and took the risk. It was not just a move, but a desire to completely change her life. She gathered all the money she had saved, bought a one-way plane ticket, and set off for another continent. There, she had no relatives, no friends, nor acquaintances. Nobody was waiting for her, and she barely knew any English. But she took that step into the unknown. Her parents had mixed feelings about their daughter's decision, but no one tried to stop her since she was already an adult and could make such serious decisions independently. Nevertheless, her relatives were very concerned about how her life would unfold in a foreign land. Ildiko decided to head straight to sunny California, where she planned to look for a job, learn the language, and, so to speak, put down roots. The move was a real culture shock for her. After living in conservative, prim, and cold Hungary, America indeed seemed like a fairy tale, and a place where all dreams come true. Initially, the young woman stayed in a budget hostel, trying to save money since she still had to find a job, which was not easy without knowing the language. However, luck soon smiled on her, and she was hired as an assistant to a master stylist in one of the local beauty salons. The salary allowed her to rent a decent apartment and provide for her basic needs, but to work in the field of cosmetology and aesthetic medicine, Krajnyak needed to master the language well and obtain the appropriate medical license in the US. With no connections or acquaintances, Ildiko could only rely on her own strength. She worked diligently, dedicating all her free time to learning English and improving her communication skills. Her perseverance and hard work soon paid off. She successfully passed the required exams and obtained a license allowing her to work in cosmetology, leading specialist. Just a couple of years after moving, Ildiko became the leading specialist at a spa center in an elite 5-star hotel frequented by show business stars and other celebrities. She earned a reputation as the best cosmetologist in town, with bookings made months in advance. Additionally, as a professional, she constantly educated herself and advanced her qualifications. She attended international exhibitions and seminars, had an excellent understanding of the compositions of cosmetic products and treatments, and easily helped clients resolve almost any aesthetic skin issues. Beyond her professional skills, the young woman possessed superb diplomatic qualities. She easily and effortlessly made useful contacts and influential friends, quickly established relationships with business partners, and had a natural business acumen. Krajnyak was not content to always work for others and dreamed of opening her own salon, which would be the best not only in the city, but throughout the state of California. By the mid-90s, the young Hungarian had become the most sought-after specialist at the center where she worked. Clients who had once visited her for treatment subsequently tried to book appointments only with this cosmetologist. Ildiko already understood that the client base she had built would stay with her, even if she changed her place of work. The management of the spa complex knew this too, and therefore did everything possible to retain the specialist by creating the most favorable working conditions. Family life. Krajnyak was open, friendly, sociable, and very beautiful, naturally attracting a lot of male attention and having many admirers. However, during her first years in the United States, she was more focused on learning the language, professional growth, and career advancement, pushing her personal life to not just a back burner, but perhaps to the 5th priority. In 1995, she met a young man named Ramilo Vestal who had Asian roots and had immigrated to America with his family as a schoolboy. He had pursued a medical education and was working as a doctor at a local hospital. The couple quickly found a common language, and romantic feelings developed between them. A year after meeting in the spring of 1996, they had a modest wedding attended only by their closest people. 2 years later, the couple welcomed their only child together, a son they named Keanu. The new parents adored their child, spending all their free time with family. Their home was filled with love and understanding, and everyone who knew them noted how harmoniously they complemented each other and how they radiated happiness when together. In the mid-90s, Ildiko convinced her cousin to also move to the United States, and she decided to relocate with her husband and children. The relatives settled near her home. They communicated closely, regularly visited each other, and their families became close friends. In 2000, after a long illness, Krajnyak's father passed away, which was a severe blow to the family. By that time, her elder brother Laszlo was already married, raising children, and living in another city, leaving their mother Juliana alone in the family home, suffering from severe depression. Additionally, she began showing signs of dementia, making it unsafe to leave her alone. Ildiko decided to bring her mother to California so that the elderly woman wouldn't feel lonely and could spend her final years surrounded by family. For Juliana, moving to America was also a challenging step, but her daughter helped her adapt, surrounding her with love and care. Moreover, the grandmother was overjoyed to have the chance to dote on her grandson Keanu, whom she had previously only seen in photographs. Own business. In 2002, Krajnyak finally decided to open her own salon. By then, she had accumulated enough funds, gained business experience, and built an extensive client base. Supported by her loved ones, the young woman dared to risk everything. Ildiko established her spa salon in Aliso Viejo, California, located in the San Joaquin Hills of southern Orange County. She named it Magyar Kozmetika, which translates to Hungarian cosmetics. Soon her establishment earned a 5-star rating, and its fame spread throughout the state. In her work, Ildiko used only premium quality cosmetics, treatments, and equipment. She earned a reputation as one of the best cosmetologists, and she took great pride in this. The woman skillfully managed and developed her business, and she had chosen an excellent location for her salon. Her establishment was located in a major business center in Southern California, 10 miles from the popular Laguna Beach and about 70 miles from Los Angeles. For many years, the cosmetologist successfully developed her business, with her income steadily increasing. By the late 2000s, she and her husband had bought a luxurious large house where they moved with their son and Krajnyak's mother. The woman had her own driver and household assistants, could afford anything she desired, and lived the life she had always dreamed of. Moreover, it is worth noting that Ildiko herself was a living advertisement for her salon. She always looked stunning and seemed not to age at all. She also continuously enhanced her qualifications, obtained an international medical certificate, and could practice in virtually any country. Over time, the cosmetologist also began to conduct training seminars and courses for professionals in the field. For many years, Krajnyak engaged in her beloved work, striving to be the best. She developed business strategies, researched the market to stay competitive, found reliable suppliers, and devised advertising campaigns. And all this did not prevent her from continuing to personally see clients who sought her services specifically. For her only beloved child, the woman paid for education in an elite private school, music lessons with the best teachers, and language courses. From her experience, she knew how important it was to master several foreign languages and how useful this could be in life. In 2016, Keanu became a student at a prestigious university and went to study in Washington. Crisis and the last vacation. The year 2017 started off as an exceptionally tough one for Ildiko. The business center, which had housed her spa salon for over 15 years, suddenly changed ownership. The new owner quickly made it clear that he had his own plans for the building in a prestigious area, and thus the leases with the tenants were swiftly terminated. Ildiko was not prepared for such a turn of events and had to immediately look for a new location to relocate. For Krajnyak, the situation was a major stressor. She faced colossal losses and tried to find a suitable place close to the old one. She stayed in Aliso Viejo but moved from the luxurious business center to a 2-story commercial building, occupying half of the first floor. The move itself also amounted to a significant expense, as it involved transporting a large amount of expensive equipment that required careful handling. Additionally, the new location needed some cosmetic repairs before it could be operational. In March 2018, when the main work was completed and the spa salon reopened at the new location, a work-weary and stressed Ildiko decided to take a small vacation. She flew to Portugal for 2 weeks, relaxing under the warm sun at a popular beach resort. It seemed that the difficulties were behind her, and she was quick to make up for lost time. A month later, Laszlo flew to California to visit his sister and elderly mother. They communicated well, spent quality time together, and even took a family trip to Washington to surprise Keanu at university. On May 5th, Ildiko and her brother flew to their native Hungary. The man was returning home to his family, while for Ildiko, it was a business trip which he decided to combine with a visit to relatives she had not seen in a long time. She returned home with innovative treatments that provided stunning, rejuvenating effects, eager to put them to use. Unfortunately, less than a week later, the salon into which she had poured her soul was destroyed, and she herself was found dead. Accident, attack, or planned crime. On May 15, 2018, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the emergency services received consecutive reports of a powerful explosion and fire in the commercial center housing Ildiko's spa salon. The blast was heard several blocks away, and frightened people speculated that it could have been an attack, fearing it might be the first in a series. Across the street from the destroyed building was a daycare, and parents, upon hearing what had happened, rushed there to ensure their children were safe. Fire trucks, ambulances, and several police patrols were immediately dispatched to the scene. The building itself was partially destroyed. Flames engulfed the interior, and the street was littered with debris from bricks, glass shards, and roofing fragments. At that time, it was unclear how many people were inside at the time of the explosion and whether there were any fatalities or injuries. Witnesses reported a loud bang and acrid smoke that quickly spread through the street, triggering car alarms in the vicinity. As rescuers moved closer to the epicenter of the explosion, the scene became increasingly horrific. Blood was everywhere inside, and under the debris and broken furniture, 2 injured people were found. Later, it was discovered they were a mother and daughter who had come for treatments at the spa on that fateful day. The women were concussed, lacerated by shards, and had severe burns. They were knocked unconscious by the blast wave, but fortunately both were saved. Several other employees and clients sustained minor injuries and smoke inhalation and were taken to the hospital. But the most gruesome discovery awaited the rescuers. Behind the former reception desk, they found disfigured and severely burned human remains. Identification was not immediately possible, but it was soon confirmed to be the 48-year-old spa owner, Ildiko Krajnyak, who was at the epicenter. Bomb disposal units were at the scene, as there was no certainty that another explosion would not occur. From the beginning, it was difficult to determine what exactly caused such a destructive blast and what had detonated. The initial theory of a gas leak and electrical short was quickly dismissed, as there was a specific point of explosion. The possibility of a terrorist act was investigated, though no other explosive devices were found in this or neighboring buildings. Another very plausible theory was that of a carefully planned crime against Ildiko. The deceased was a kind and open person, engaged in charity work, and always willing to help others. However, she was also a successful entrepreneur with many envious rivals and competitors who might have wanted to eliminate her radically. Each theory had to be checked, but first, it was necessary to speak with the victim's relatives and friends, as well as interview the surviving witnesses. At the same time, an emergency call came from a woman named Lori Stone, who could not reach her boyfriend, Stephen Bill. According to her, he was a co-founder of the spa salon and might also have been in the building at the time of the explosion. Eyewitness accounts. The surviving mother and daughter suffered serious injuries, were urgently operated on, and were in intensive care. As soon as their condition stabilized slightly, they agreed to speak with law enforcement and recount everything that happened. On that day, the women were undergoing treatments at Krajnyak's spa salon. They had been there before, knew the owner well, and everything was as usual during this visit until they went to the reception desk to pay for their cosmetic services. Ildiko often performed the duties of the receptionist herself and was at the desk at that moment. She was sorting through mail, and there was also a large package on the desk in front of her. She took the payment, issued the receipts to the clients, and then, continuing the casual conversation, took a box cutter and began to open that very box. At that moment, an unexpected, powerful explosion occurred, and everything after seemed like a blur. According to the daughter, she first saw a blinding flash followed by a deafening bang, then felt a wave of heat and realized she was flying through the air. In reality, she was thrown by the blast wave, but miraculously, she remained conscious, managed to find her mother amid the chaos, and dragged her to a destroyed wall for air, after which she lost consciousness and later woke up in the hospital. After speaking with the victims, there was no doubt that this was a premeditated crime, and the explosive device had been disguised as an ordinary package. The next steps were to identify a circle of suspects and determine who might not only wish the woman dead, but also carry it through. It was also unclear whether the target was solely Ildiko, or if her 59-year-old business partner Stephen Bill was also in mortal danger. Police were immediately dispatched to the man's home. Bill had just returned from a business trip and was greeted by a pile of packages at his doorstep. He was moved to a safe distance, and bomb disposal experts checked each box, but they only contained store orders, and no explosives were found. Stephen was questioned, but he appeared shocked by the news of Krajnyak's death and could not name anyone who might wish her harm. No longer spouses, just neighbors. The deceased's husband, Ramilo Vestil, arrived at the scene as soon as he heard about the incident. He had hoped until the last moment that his wife might have survived, but upon hearing the tragic news, he was utterly devastated. However, it was also necessary to question him. At this point, a very curious detail emerged that only a few members of the Krajnyak family knew. It turned out that Ildiko and Ramilo had long ceased to be a couple in the conventional sense. They continued to live in their shared, large, and luxurious house, had not formalized a divorce, and maintained a warm relationship. But in fact, they had become just neighbors to each other. In recent years, each had their own personal life. They did not feel jealousy towards one another and were ready to let go completely if either of them found true love. This circumstance seemed strange and very suspicious to the police. In the event of his wife's death, Ramilo, still being her legal spouse, would inherit the house, all the property, and the quite profitable business. However, this last aspect argued rather in favor of the man's innocence. Why would he destroy the spa salon, which was the main source of income for their family? Business partner and former lover. It was established that over the past couple of years, the deceased had been involved with at least 5 different men. Most of these were fleeting interests, but 2 names particularly drew the investigators' attention. A close friend of Krajnyak revealed that the woman had been seeing a man named Nicholas for a few months, to whom she felt strong emotions, and did not rule out the possibility that their relationship could progress to a new level, even potentially leading to marriage. A week before the tragedy, the couple spent a weekend together in Sacramento, where they flew spontaneously, dropping all other engagements. Detectives quickly located this man and interrogated him, but he was found to have no involvement in the tragedy and was as shocked by the events as anyone else, with no motive to harm the woman he loved. It then emerged that several months earlier, Ildiko had been closely involved with her business partner, Stephen Bill. When investigators looked into how they met and why they became partners, despite Bill having no previous ties to the beauty industry, a quite intriguing story surfaced. About a year and a half ago, when the woman faced serious business problems, was looking for a new location for the salon, and was experiencing significant losses, she met Stephen. He was charmed by her beauty, fell in love at first sight, and agreed to cover all the expenses associated with moving the spa center. He also invested a substantial sum into its development, becoming Krajnyak's business partner. At the same time, they began a romantic relationship that lasted about 6 months. It is likely that the woman reciprocated out of gratitude, but she did not truly have deep feelings for Bill. In March 2018, they vacationed together in Portugal. But by that time, Ildiko had already started an affair with Nicholas and was constantly in touch with him by phone, which irritated Stephen. She broke up with him immediately upon returning. The former lovers continued to run the business together, and Bill did not give up trying to win her back, but she was already happy in her new relationship. He even tried to make her jealous by starting a relationship with Laurie Stone, but Krajnyak was unaffected by this. She no longer cared. It is likely that Bill harbored resentment towards her and could have sought revenge. Strange hobby and skeletons in the closet. The police decided to take a closer look at Stephen and discovered that he had a rather specific hobby. He was involved in making fireworks and was well versed in pyrotechnics. The man did not deny this and did not obstruct the search of his home. There, officers found professional equipment, materials for creating decorative fireworks and rockets, as well as gunpowder and other combustible chemicals. At that time, the police had no solid reason or evidence to detain Bill, and he was released. However, they decided to investigate his background further and discovered that his wife had died under strange circumstances 10 years ago. Officially, the cause of death was pancreatitis, but it was preceded by a mysterious accident at home while they were moving furniture. It appeared that Stephen had provoked the incident, but nothing could be proven. Furthermore, he received a substantial insurance payout after becoming a widower, which also suggested a motive for murder. Arrest and trial. Several months later, detectives managed to find video surveillance footage from May 10th, showing Bill purchasing a mix of combustible chemical components and parts for making poppers, which were later found at the explosion site. Additionally, it was revealed that early on the morning of the tragedy, he visited the spa salon to leave the deadly package. He entered through the back door using his key and parked his car on a nearby street to remain unnoticed. On March 3, 2019, Stephen Bill was arrested on charges of premeditated murder, use of a weapon of mass destruction, and intentional destruction of a building. During the trial, several more charges were added, related to causing serious bodily harm. One of the women injured in the explosion lost an eye, while another suffered deep burns to her face and body. Although Bill pleaded not guilty, the evidence and testimonies collected were not in his favor. Moreover, witnesses said he had never reconciled with the fact that Ildiko had left him and he had begun to stalk her. Shortly before her death, the woman had confided to friends that she feared for her life and was concerned that her ex-lover might seek revenge. Only in early 2024 was Stephen Bill finally found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. All appeals submitted by him and his team of lawyers were rejected. Lisa Maria Kajsa was born in 1994 in a large family where her 8 siblings also grew up. It was a large, but far from prosperous family. Parents were busy with their own problems and did not show love and care towards their children. Moreover, there were rumors that abuse and violence were rampant in the family. The story in question unfolded in the year 2020, at the very time when the whole world was consumed with the fight against COVID-19. In one corner of Ecuador, quietly and unnoticed, truly terrible events were unfolding. Here, in the small parish of Pifo, on the northeastern outskirts of Quito, the protagonist of this tragic story was born and raised. Lisa Maria Kajsa, a woman with an enigmatic gaze whose life story became a true Ecuadorian nightmare. On that unfortunate Tuesday, October 27, 2020, Lisa sent several messages to the father of her children, David. They were words full of despair, because their paths with David at that time had already almost parted. In these lines, she confessed her love for him and her unexpected new pregnancy. However, in subsequent messages, Lisa wrote that life was losing its meaning for her, and the decision to terminate the pregnancy was inevitable. Throughout the night, Lisa pleaded with David to come to her, but his refusal was resolute. His parents also urged him to stay home, and David took their advice. In the early morning hours of October 28th, neighbors in Lisa's home heard a faint cry for help. Looking out the window, they found a woman lying on the floor with signs of vomiting. The neighbors rushed to help her, immediately calling emergency services. The doctors and police arrived and found Lisa in a critical condition, but still alive. After administering first aid, she was immediately hospitalized. However, in the house, her children, a girl of 5 and a boy of 9, were found unconscious. The doctors were unable to help them. Their little hearts had stopped beating at that point. Authorities learned the identity of the children's father and contacted David Acosta, who, upon learning of the tragedy, immediately arrived on the scene accompanied by his father. He was informed that Lisa was in the hospital and his children were found without signs of life. After several days of fighting for life in the hospital, Lisa finally regained consciousness. By that time, the investigators, guided by their findings, had presented the prosecutor's office with sufficiently convincing arguments to issue an arrest warrant for this mysterious woman. When she was released from the hospital, she was immediately transferred to a social rehabilitation center. The authorities insisted that Lisa undergo a psychological and psychiatric evaluation, as her state of mind required further investigation as part of the upcoming trial. Lisa ended up in a rehabilitation center, and doctors and psychologists took up their work. In a conversation with a criminal psychologist, Lisa opened up about her difficult childhood, where her parents fought and abused each other and their children. Her childhood had a noticeable impact on her state of mind, and moments of quarrels and her parents' divorce became an integral part of her memories. Such a childhood forced Lisa to go to work from the age of 11 to be able to study. The girl strived to escape from her dysfunctional family and build her future in a different way. The expert report also indicated that Lisa had been abused. She talked about how, after several years of marriage, David, her husband, changed dramatically. He began to humiliate his spouse and then to raise his hand against her. On the day of the tragedy with the children, investigators working at the scene found several glasses with liquid residue on the table. These finds later revealed traces of epilepsy pills belonging to one of the children, as well as other chemicals requiring identification. Police officers thoroughly searched the house, and after noticing a strange odor in the kitchen, noticed a suspicious area under the utility room. They broke down the barrier and found a lifeless body wrapped in a blanket, with characteristic signs of having been there for a long time. Later, further investigation revealed that the discovered body belonged to Jaime Yanchaguano, a 28-year-old who had been in contact with Lisa. Jaime had been reported missing by his family days before the gruesome discovery. According to Rosa Yanchaguano, Jaime's sister, he was last seen on October 18th. Rosa told investigators that after her brother disappeared, Lisa called several times inquiring about him. Lisa claimed to have received a text message from Jaime in which he wrote how some illegal substance traffickers were holding him by force and demanding a ransom of $8,000. In doing so, she strongly cautioned Jaime's family against contacting the police. It became a key point in a complex investigation that required detectives to not only solve the tragedy, but to find out if there were any other hidden victims in the story. During her interrogation, Lisa said that in 2020, while working in a cookie factory, she met Jaime Yanchaguano. According to her, he became just a friend. Lisa sought to return to her husband, who was allegedly going to blackmail Jaime to get money from him. David made it clear to his wife that if she did not help him, he would divorce her. Later, David handed Lisa a white powder and told her to slip it into Jaime's food. When the task was completed, Jaime fell asleep and never woke up again. Realizing what had happened, Lisa tried in desperation to get her husband back, but all was unsuccessful, so she swallowed the same poison and gave it to her children. However, it did not have the expected effect on her, and Lisa turned to her neighbors for help, trying to save herself from the same horror that had befallen her children. After her testimony, investigators launched an investigation, but no evidence of David's involvement in the events was ever found. No one close to the couple could have predicted that Lisa Maria and David Acosta's fate would lead them through such a difficult ordeal. When they met, Lisa was only 16 years old and still in high school. She was a dreamy and romantic girl, and David was a strong and determined young man. Soon their friendship developed into strong feelings, and this led to Lisa's unexpected pregnancy. Although the young people's families did not approve of their relationship, David's parents always supported their son and welcomed Lisa into their family. In difficult moments, David's family became a true support for the young couple. Inviting Lisa to live with them, they made every effort to make sure she finished high school. When Lisa turned 18, the lovers got married. 2 years later, the young family was waiting for the appearance of a second child, a little daughter. David's parents decided to provide the young couple with their own housing. They gave Lisa and David a separate apartment, which became for them a corner of family happiness. But over time, the couple's relationship began to deteriorate. It was obvious that both spouses sinned of cheating, which led to mistrust and disappointment. Boundless love, which seemed unshakable, began to weaken. To make matters worse, Lisa complained of psychological abuse from David, which led her to seek help from the police. Eventually, she was granted a protective order, and David was forced to leave the family home. It was at this point that Lisa began to use her position and blackmail David, demanding money for the opportunity to see their joint children. The beginning of September 2020 brought an unexpected challenge into Lisa's life that drastically changed her daily routine. The young mother discovered that her oldest son was suffering from seizures, and in desperation, she went to the emergency room at Baca Ortiz Hospital. After stabilizing the baby's condition, the doctors decided to conduct a series of tests, revealing a focal form of epilepsy, a severe disease that affects a specific part of the brain. The doctors urged Lisa to undergo additional tests, including MRI scans, and to consult with specialists as soon as possible. However, the mother, as if ignoring the seriousness of the situation, decided not to follow these recommendations. A month later, the situation was repeated. Lissa was back in the emergency room with her son suffering from the same symptoms. After reviewing the boy's medical history, the doctors discovered that the mother had somehow failed to fulfill the prescriptions given to her earlier. No tests had been taken, consultations with specialists had not taken place, and it seems that the son had not received the necessary treatment. The doctors, concerned for the child's welfare, once again reminded Lissa of the importance of following medical advice. They warned her that ignoring the doctor's advice could lead to legal consequences, as she could be putting her son's health and well-being at risk. However, this time too, Lissa disregarded the doctor's warning. A couple weeks after discovering her son's illness, she decided to call David. The serious tone in her voice worried David. She informed him that a social worker would be coming to see her shortly to discuss their son's diagnosis and retirement. On the day of the appointment, David showed up, but the social worker was long gone. To brighten the waiting time, Lissa offered him a drink. However, as David drank the drink, he suddenly felt unwell. His condition was worsening, and the social worker had not shown up, so David decided to go home to get something to deal with his discomfort. The next morning, David woke up in a terrible state. He could barely speak because his tongue was numb, every step caused discomfort, and his eyes hurt. His parents insisted on calling an ambulance. David was taken to the hospital where he spent several days. Tests revealed the presence of a psychoactive substance in his system, but given that he hadn't used anything of the sort, David began to speculate how this could have happened. Eventually, he speculated that perhaps someone had deliberately slipped him some substance in a public place. David was grateful for his life and realized that what had happened could have ended much worse. In early October 2020, Lissa made the decision to hire a nanny for her children. Her cousin Patricia recommended her friend Bertha, a responsible 48-year-old woman looking for work. On Monday, October 5th, Bertha arrived at the young mother's house. Lissa urged her to take a pill that she said helped prevent infection with the COVID-19 virus, an epidemic of which was at its height at the time. Claiming that it was a highly effective natural remedy, Lissa convinced Bertha to swallow the medicine and enter the house. They sat down to discuss the babysitter's childcare duties. A few minutes later, Bertha began to feel sick. She felt a headache, her stomach began to upset, and eventually she vomited. A short while later, Patricia showed up. It turned out that she had called her cousin repeatedly, but Lissa didn't answer, which alerted Patricia. She decided to check what had happened and immediately went to her house. Upon entering, she found Bertha lying on the couch, who was practically fainting already. Lissa shared with her cousin what had happened and expressed concern. Learning that Lissa still had not called an ambulance, Patricia immediately did so herself. After a while, doctors arrived and sent Bertha to the hospital. The condition of the victim managed to stabilize. Doctors diagnosed poisoning with a toxic substance, which often happens when using various medications. Doctors decided that Bertha did not tolerate some component of the composition of the pills from COVID-19. A few months before this tragic incident, in June of the same year, Lissa's former buddy, Mark Ascanto, had died of poisoning. At the time, the cause of his death had gone unnoticed, but now, given all these strange circumstances, Mark's case required additional attention. Investigators scrutinized the deceased's home and found Lissa's fingerprints on the glasses used the night before Mark's death. This fact added new evidence to the investigation, pointing to Lissa's possible involvement in the incident. But suddenly, a new accusation was made against Lissa. Her own family made a shocking report to the police. It turns out that on September 2nd, the family had a family gathering where Lissa offered to let everyone taste a drink of her own making. 7 brothers and sisters of the young woman, as well as their parents, drank the unknown drink and immediately felt sick. Fortunately, no one died, but the 56-year-old mother suffered a stroke. Lissa's father claimed that while the relatives were seeking medical attention, his daughter stole $1,300 from the house. Now the investigation included not only crimes against the children and a former boyfriend, but also an incident that jeopardized the lives and health of her own family members. As it turned out, that wasn't all. investigators encountered another strange event. In May of that year, Jose Luis Erazo, a friend of Lissa's, was found dead in his home. A few days before, Jose had suddenly disappeared, and neighbors soon smelled a rotting odor, prompting them to contact the authorities. An examination of the body initially revealed nothing suspicious, and was ruled a heart attack. But one of Jose's sisters suspected something strange and hid a bottle of alcohol found in the refrigerator. In addition, Jose's family noticed that some items were missing from the house. It turned out that Lissa and Jose were friends, and when the guy died, the alleged killer contacted his relatives by phone. With a distraught voice, she stated that Jose owed her a large sum of money, and she had to contact the family to repay the debt. This cunning plan did not work, and a little later Lissa called Jose's family again, changing her voice to conceal her identity. Identifying herself as Jose's friend, she claimed that she was pregnant by him and now had to apply for child support. Although Jose's family did not believe these stories, Lissa was not about to give up and made a third attempt to deceive them. She said she knew who was responsible for Jose's death and offered to meet to uncover the details. Had she not been arrested on charges of killing her own children in Jaime, the list of victims might have gotten longer. When the media reported the arrest of Lissa, who had poisoned 3 people, Jose's relatives understood. They immediately reported their suspicions to the authorities, and Jose's body was exhumed for forensic examination to determine the true cause of death. The relatives were not mistaken. Traces of poison were found in the remains of the deceased. On December 22, 2020, a hearing was held for Lissa Maria Kaiser for the murder of her 2 children, whose names and photos were classified, and for Jaime Yanchaguano. The trial was conducted virtually due to restrictions related to the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Lissa had been in contact from a social rehabilitation center. The prosecutor's statement said that Lissa gave her children a toxic mixture of insecticides and anti-epileptic drugs. In interrogations, she claimed that she had grown desperate and could not leave her children with her husband David, who did not care for the children. In fact, she admitted that she wished them dead. At the end of the hearing, the judge issued the defendant a court pass and ordered her remanded into custody pending trial. The children's trial next took place in 2021 at the Pichincha Provincial Court. The prosecutor presented a set of evidence to prove Lissa's guilt. Among them were statements by David, who revealed the content of messages the wife had received on the eve of the tragedy. In one of the messages, she claimed that she would take with her what belonged to her, referring to the children. She said she didn't know where her children and herself would go, heaven or hell. But now she felt as if she was in hell. Lissa added that she doesn't expect her husband to forgive her because she knows he hated her, and now he will hate her even more. David also spoke about his unstable relationship with his wife. At the hearing, the defendant's reconstructed testimony was presented, stating that she took 2 pills that day, called for help, and then passed out. According to the reconstruction conducted by the prosecutor's office, the daughter died while still in bed, and her older brother tried to take a few steps to call for help, but fell and died. The conclusion of the forensic medical examination was extremely clear. The children died as a result of a premeditated crime. The deaths were the result of suffocation caused by pulmonary edema and intoxication caused by a mixture of epilepsy medication and other unspecified substances, presumably insecticides and disinfectant. The prosecution also charged Lissa with the death of Jaime Yanchaguano, whose body was found bricked up in the kitchen. The perpetrator was also suspected of attempting to kill David and members of her own family. The hearing raised the issue of Lissa's irresponsible attitude to her son's health after being diagnosed with localized epilepsy. The mother ignored instructions for further tests and follow-up examinations, and when the boy was hospitalized again, his condition was exacerbated by her own mother's negligence. Warnings from medical professionals did not change her attitude toward her son's treatment, leading to a threatened termination of her parental rights. Lissa's mental health investigations revealed her to be highly emotional and environmentally dependent. She sought constant attention and understanding from others and experienced severe anxiety when events did not unfold according to her plan. She also exhibited a tendency to self-harm. She attempted to say goodbye to her life at least 3 times, but was unsuccessful each time. Witnesses described her as insecure, attachment-seeking, exhibiting schizoid and erratic behavior. The findings of the psychological analysis also emphasized that on the day of the tragic events, Lisa acted with full awareness of her actions. After a long trial that lasted 10 months, Lisa Maria Kaiser was found guilty of the crime against her children. The Pichincha Provincial Court sentenced her to 34 years and 8 months imprisonment. In addition to this, she was ordered to pay David a compensation of more than $20,000. It was noted in the press that Lisa remained calm throughout the proceedings and only showed emotion when her children were mentioned. The Jaime Yanchaguano murder case, which began in August 2021, appeared to be unfinished. New details were revealed during the court hearings. Lisa admitted giving her friend a white substance mixed with alcohol, but claimed she got it from David. However, the investigation proved otherwise. According to a psychiatrist who interviewed Lisa, she did not want to take Jaime's life. She wanted to intimidate his family so she could then extort money. She did demand $8,000 as ransom. Experts called the plan disorganized, which ultimately led to the crime. In addition, forensic tests revealed that it wasn't that simple. Jaime was found to have poison in his system, and the cause of death was strangulation. The body was found with a shattered ribcage and wire around the neck. Lisa claimed that after her friend died, she decided to bury him under a back room and cement him in. The store owner's testimony confirmed that Lisa bought building materials during the days of Jaime's disappearance. After the parties' arguments, the prosecutor's office requested a new trial in April 2022. At that trial, an additional charge of extortion was filed. Lisa called Jaime's relatives, claiming he was being held by a group of gangsters, and demanded $8,000 for his release. The defense relied on the lack of conclusive evidence that Lisa was involved in Jaime's murder. Nevertheless, she was found guilty and received a 22-year prison sentence, as well as a sentence to pay $5,000 to the victim's mother. While Jaime's trial was underway, the investigation of Mark Escanto and Jose Luis Erazo, Lisa's alleged victims, was nearing completion. Mark Escanto was 48 years old, and tests conducted after his death revealed traces of the same substance that Lisa had given to her children. In addition, Mark was found to have severe inflammation of the stomach. The family's lawyer claimed that Lisa met Mark, offered him a beer, and then put the poison in the drink. A glass with Lisa and Mark's fingerprints, as well as a swab containing the woman's DNA, was provided to authorities. Alleged motives for the murder included jealousy and money. It is also known that Lisa had asked Mark to help her financially, and there was evidence that he loaned her at least $120. Mark was Lisa's first known victim. The final outcome of this case, as well as that of Jose Luis Erazo, remain unknown. They may not have been reported in the press, or the investigation may not yet have reached the stage of being formally charged and brought to trial. At the time of her brutal crimes, Lisa Maria was only 26 years old. Her high-profile criminal case has become one of the most horrific and disturbing in Ecuador's recent history. These crimes made her known throughout the country as Dona Venado. Lisa Maria Kaiser is recognized as a serial killer in Ecuador. Her victims have endured terrible suffering, and their relatives have suffered unbearable pain. The charges include 5 murders and 9 attempted murders. Under Ecuadorian law, the maximum sentence she could face is 40 years in prison. That means Lisa could be released when she turned 70 years old. It is still unclear what motivated Dona Venado to commit such horrific acts. Was her act the result of resentment for not getting what she expected in life? Many speculate that the motive was money, and in David's case, Lisa acted out of a lust for revenge, which led to the tragedy with her children. The most horrific part of this story is not only the number of victims left in the path of Dona Venado, but also the fate of 2 innocent children who could not have guessed that their mother, who gave them life, would take it away so absurdly and cruelly.
An unequal marriage and a crime for millions. People who are madly in love with money but do not know how to earn it themselves can be extremely cunning and dangerous. They easily cross the boundaries of morality, ethics, and law. For them, there are no friends, relatives, or loved ones, and they are capable of any betrayal, even a crime, for money. Such was the case with a seemingly charming and sweet woman named Celeste. The case of Celeste and Stephen Beard in the early 2000s shocked the United States of America and was later widely covered in the media of other countries. The story began in a typical manner. An elderly millionaire decided to marry a young beauty who worked for him as a maid. Friends, relatives, and business partners advised Mr. Beard against this step, but he was blinded by love and genuinely believed that his feelings were mutual. Stephen was the fourth of 5 legal husbands of this cunning and greedy woman. She never loved him, but only saw him as a source of her own enrichment. In various ways, the wife forced the millionaire to change the conditions of their marriage contract so that, in case of his death, she would receive as much money and property as possible. To hasten her husband's demise while deflecting suspicion from herself, Celeste used a woman who was in love with her. Early years of Stephen Beard. Stephen Beard was born on August 11, 1924, in Dallas, Texas. He was the only child of a woman named Dolores, but never knew his biological father. He was always very close to his mother, who worked multiple jobs to provide everything necessary for her son. Stephen's childhood and youth coincided with the difficult times of the Great Depression and World War II. After finishing high school, the young man tried for some time to find a job in advertising, but soon realized that without education, it would be very difficult to get a good job, so he studied to become a marketer. However, he did not have time to apply his knowledge and practice, as he went to war, serving in the Navy until 1945. During the war years, Stephen gained an engineering specialty, but despite this, he could not find a decent job in peacetime. He managed to get a position as a sales consultant in a small shoe store in his hometown of Dallas, where he earned a very modest salary, barely enough for the essentials. Nevertheless, Stephen later called that period the happiest in his life, because he was young, full of strength, enthusiasm, and faith in a bright future. Most importantly, during his time working in the store, he met the main woman in his life, his wife, Alice Adams. The girl was 2 years younger than him, possessed striking looks, a slender figure, and was trying to build a career in the modeling business, but abandoned her ambitions to devote herself to her family. The young couple, deeply in love, got married in 1948, just a couple of months after meeting, and a year later, their eldest daughter was born. In 1950, Alice gave her husband a long-awaited son, and 3 years later, another boy was born. Their family was strong and loving, where everyone cared for and supported each other. From janitor to millionaire. In the early days of regular electronic television broadcasting, Stephen dreamed of working in the industry, but his path was challenging and filled with obstacles. In the late 1940s, he managed to get a job at one of the studios, but only as a janitor. However, the young man did not give up, continued searching, and soon luck smiled upon him. He was offered a chance to try his hand as a host of an entertainment program on a radio station, and he eagerly accepted the offer. After several years of hard work, Beard became the producer of a popular television program. His income rapidly increased, and he felt right at home in the field of mass communications and information. Stephen became an excellent specialist in advertising and entertainment content promotion, developing new ideas and brilliantly bringing them to life. He worked with many different people, made many useful connections, constantly improved himself, and strove to improve the world. By the mid-1950s, Stephen was successfully engaged not only in advertising and producing TV projects, but also invested the money he earned in real estate and started selling cars. By the age of 40, Stephen had earned his first $1 million and had no plans to stop there. In 1974, at the age of 50, Beard managed to win a tender together with the television company he founded. The businessman, along with his wife and 3 children, moved to Austin, the capital of Texas, where they bought a luxurious mansion with a large pool. Their home was located in one of the most prestigious areas of the city, covering almost 5,000 square meters. The couple joined an elite local club, membership in which cost them over $50,000 a year, but by that time, such an amount was insignificant for them.
The Beards achieved incredible heights, raised 3 children, gave them an excellent education, and now simply enjoyed life. Alice continued to take great care of her appearance, exercised, and despite her age and having 3 children, maintained a slender figure. Meanwhile, Stephen rapidly gained weight and refused to do anything about it. He joked that his physique matched his social status and income level. All his wife's attempts to get him to exercise and watch his diet were met with promises to consider her advice. By the early 1990s, Beard's fortune had exceeded $10 million. The businessman and his family had virtually everything money could buy. The couple acquired their own yacht, traveled extensively, doted on their grandchildren, and were incredibly happy. It seemed that this happiness would last forever, but suddenly, tragedy struck their home. Illness and death of Alice Beard. In early 1993, Alice sought medical help due to severe migraines that had been constantly tormenting her. A thorough examination revealed a cancerous tumor in her brain. Treatment began immediately. One of the best neurosurgeons operated on Mrs. Beard, and she was prescribed expensive medications that were hard to obtain. Her husband spared no expense on innovative therapy, which offered some hope for recovery. Alice's diagnosis was a shock to the entire family, but they supported her and believed in the best. It seemed that their love, care, and advanced treatment technologies yielded results, and after 6 months, she went into remission. In August of that year, they went on a cruise to relax, celebrate their 45th wedding anniversary, and the victory over the illness. It was a wonderful, romantic, but unfortunately, their last vacation together. By late September, the insidious disease returned with renewed vigor and began to progress rapidly. Neither the best specialists nor experimental therapy could help Alice. She passed away on October 13th, 1993, at the age of 68. For her family, it was an irreparable loss and a pain that nothing could alleviate. Period of depression and new love. After the passing of his beloved wife, Stephen fell into a deep depression. He lost interest in his business affairs, spent a lot of time at the bar of the upscale country club, sitting alone, drinking heavily, and just passing time to avoid returning to his empty, enormous house. By then, his children had long grown up and moved away, and his grandchildren only visited during holidays, leaving the millionaire in the mansion surrounded only by his numerous housekeepers, cooks, gardeners, and other staff. The man was visibly withering away. As a family man, he desperately needed a kindred spirit, care, and companionship. His relatives and friends were convinced that he needed a woman who would support him and be a source of comfort during such a difficult time. However, Stephen was not ready for a new relationship. At that moment, he couldn't even imagine loving someone else again. In early 1994, Beard met an attractive young woman named Celeste Martinez, who had started working as a waitress at the country club's restaurant a couple of weeks before their first meeting. She was a pretty, smiling blonde, very sociable, and able to attract attention. She was divorced and was fighting her ex-husband for custody of their twin daughters. Celeste was experiencing financial difficulties, had many debts, and told pitiful stories about her tough life. Stephen became a sympathetic listener and quickly grew fond of this girl. He genuinely felt sorry for her, wanted to help her out of her difficult situation, and offered her a job as a maid in his home, which she gladly accepted. Thus began a rather predictable romance between the elderly millionaire and the cunning beauty, who was almost 40 years younger than him. Who is Celeste Beard? Celeste Mary Johnson, maiden name matching her 5th husband's surname, has carried several surnames over time: Ratcher, Wolf, Martinez, Johnson, but became globally notorious under the surname of her 4th husband, Stephen Beard. She was born on February 13, 1963, in Culver City, California. Nothing is known about her biological parents, as her mother abandoned her immediately after she was born. At 2 days old, she was adopted by Nancy and Edwin Johnson. The couple had spent many years unsuccessfully trying to have their own children, but Nancy had repeated miscarriages, which led to a nervous breakdown that later developed into prolonged depression, and resulted in a mental disorder. In the late 1950s, the Johnsons adopted 2 boys. In 1963, they took in Celeste, and a year and a half later, they adopted another girl. Over the years, Nancy's mental condition worsened and became increasingly unstable. The couple frequently argued, and their adopted children were unwilling witnesses to these fights. Nancy sank deeper into depression, repeatedly attempted to end her life, and even wanted to harm the children. Many years later, Celeste recounted that her most frightening childhood memory was bath time when she and her sister were in the bathtub, and their mother suddenly pushed their heads underwater, holding them there for a while before letting go. Nancy claimed she was just rinsing their hair, but the sisters were convinced their mother had tried to drown them, but then reconsidered. After this incident, Nancy was admitted to a psychiatric clinic following another nervous breakdown, leaving Edwin to care for the 4 children. He tried to be a good father and take care of his charges, but in her teenage years, Celeste openly accused him of constant molestation and abuse, which she claimed began when she was only 11. However, her words were hard to trust, as this story repeatedly changed, gained different details, and later, the blonde even alleged that her older brothers also committed acts of intimate violence against her. Pathological liar. Soon, the Johnsons separated and began a court battle for custody of their adopted children. Nancy claimed her husband was an alcoholic and accused him of domestic violence. Edwin, on the other hand, argued that the children couldn't be left with their mother because she was dangerous, and due to her mental issues, could harm herself and them at any moment. Celeste didn't want to stay with either of her adoptive parents, but in court, she testified against her father, accusing him of molestation, aggression, assault, and even armed attack. According to her, when she was a child, Edwin struck her in the head with a knife, causing her to nearly bleed to death. When asked to show the scar, she initially said it was hidden by her hair, then forgot where exactly she had been hit. Eventually, she claimed the scar had disappeared with age. Celeste constantly fabricated stories about her past, portraying herself as a victim. She understood this was the easiest way to attract attention, elicit pity and sympathy from others, and get what she wanted. During her teenage years, Celeste was extremely temperamental, behaved aggressively and sometimes irrationally, leading her to be taken to a psychiatrist. She was never diagnosed, with the conclusion being that it was just a difficult adolescence compounded by an unhealthy family environment. Celeste went through several more foster families, but never settled anywhere. Thanks to her striking appearance and brazen behavior, Celeste was very popular with the opposite gender from a young age. She often skipped school, preferring to spend time with boys in bars or on the beach, and in high school she dropped out altogether. Marriage to Craig Bratcher and birth of twins. At 16, Celeste met a young man named Craig Bratcher, who was only a year and a half older than her. They quickly started living together, and less than a year later, Celeste became pregnant. In December 1980, the couple had a modest wedding, and soon after, their twin daughters, Jennifer and Christina, were born. The young parents were unprepared for family life, domestic responsibilities, and raising children. They constantly argued, and Celeste didn't want to change her lifestyle. She spent her time in bars and clubs, leaving the children with Craig. She repeatedly accused Craig of domestic violence, assault, and forcing intimacy, trying to portray herself as a victim, secure a divorce, and receive monthly payments from her ex-husband. Celeste again accused her husband of abuse when he caught her in bed with a lover and threatened to end their lives. She managed to get Craig sent to jail for several months, although no one was actually harmed during that incident. The couple divorced in the spring of 1982. Celeste filed for child support and even obtained a restraining order against her ex-husband. However, she continued to regularly leave the children with him so they wouldn't interfere with her social life. New fleeting marriages. After the divorce, Celeste wandered from one rented room to another, living off alimony and welfare, stubbornly refusing to work. She constantly took men to court, accusing them of harassment and violence, hoping to get some compensation. Celeste had no interest in her children and simply gave them to a foster family to avoid having them interfere with her lifestyle. When her ex-husband found out, he was shocked. He managed to gain custody of the children and took them in. Soon after, Celeste convinced him to try living together again. He agreed, but the reunion was short-lived. A couple of months later, Celeste again accused him of violence and took him to court. Craig even agreed to take a lie detector test, which showed he was telling the truth. After the breakup, the parents split the children. Jennifer stayed with her father, while Christina went with her mother. In 1986, Celeste married for the second time to a serviceman named Harold Wolf. But this marriage didn't last long. Despite Harold treating her and her daughter well, life with the unstable Celeste proved unbearable. She constantly argued, threatened to end her life, and even called Harold's superiors, complaining about him, nearly ruining his career. Almost immediately after the divorce, Celeste married again. Her third husband was a wealthy top manager named Jimmy Martinez. The couple bought a spacious house in Austin, but Celeste nearly bankrupted her new husband by spending his money recklessly. When he realized she had drained his accounts and put him in debt, he tried to talk to her, but she cut her wrist with scissors. After that incident, Celeste was sent for mandatory treatment in a psychiatric clinic. The therapy did her some good, and she calmed down a bit, but it didn't save her marriage to Jimmy. She also accused her third husband of domestic violence, but he managed to have all charges dropped. Immediately after that, he filed for divorce. Fraud and incredible luck. In the early 90s, Celeste faced charges of insurance fraud involving her car. She had burned the vehicle in the desert to collect a large payout, but her scam was soon uncovered. A case was opened, but Celeste got incredibly lucky. At the hearing, she encountered a sympathetic judge who sentenced her to community service and a fine equal to the insurance payout instead of prison time. Celeste needed money, so she got a job for the first time in her life. Thanks to her striking appearance and natural charm, she was hired as a waitress at an exclusive country club, where she soon met a widowed millionaire whom she quickly began to woo. Stephen felt sorry for her and invited her to his home, which was a huge stroke of luck for her. Celeste couldn't cook or do housework, so she did everything she could to make others do these tasks for her. She quickly gained the trust of the elderly man, taking advantage of his kindness and generosity. Soon the millionaire started taking his young companion out, introducing her to his friends and partners. By then, Beard's friends were already worried, seeing how cunning and greedy this woman was. However, the businessman wouldn't listen to anyone because he was simply captivated by the beauty. But Celeste was only interested in his money, and the man himself irritated her. In conversations with her daughter, she called him unflattering names, noting that he was fat, old, and disgusting, but she was willing to endure it for financial gain. Even Celeste's ex-husbands, upon learning what was happening, tried to warn the man about who he was involved with, but he didn't believe them. Beard proposed to her, and she naturally accepted right away. However, the businessman's close friends managed to convince him to at least draw up a prenuptial agreement to retain ownership of his property and control his wife's spending. Family life and extravagant spending. On February 18, 1995, the couple officially legalized their relationship. As a wedding gift, Celeste received $500,000, had access to her husband's accounts, and was set to inherit $1 million upon his death. After the wedding, her daughter Christina moved into Beard's luxurious home, and a year later, after their father ended his life, Jennifer also moved in with her mother and stepfather. Celeste treated her husband with contempt, trying her best to undermine his health and hasten his demise. She made it a tradition to drink strong alcohol at dinner, adding sleeping pills to Stephen's drinks and food so he would fall asleep, allowing her to go out to entertainment venues. Meanwhile, she constantly thought about how to change the prenuptial agreement to maximize her inheritance after Beard's death. She convinced her husband to sell their house and buy another, arguing that she felt uncomfortable living where Stephen had spent many years with Alice. In reality, the scheming blonde wanted property acquired during the marriage. But this wasn't enough,
and she began spending money from her millionaire husband's accounts. In the first month of their married life, Celeste spent over $100,000 on entertainment, shopping, and other personal needs. Her husband was bewildered, as no matter how much money he gave her, it was never enough. Moreover, Celeste stole and pawned jewelry that had belonged to the late Alice. When Stephen found out, he was so furious that he wanted not only to divorce her, but also to send her to jail. However, Celeste begged for forgiveness, telling him about her debts and the need to pay a fine for the insurance fraud case. The man believed her, helped pay off her debts, and decided to keep the marriage. Attempted murder. On October 2nd, 1999, around 3 in the morning, a frightened man called emergency services, unable to explain what was happening. He said he woke up from a sharp burning pain in his abdomen, saw that his clothes and bed were covered in blood, and his internal organs were literally spilling out, which he was holding in with his hand. The man also said his wife was somewhere in the house, but he couldn't call out to her and was just bleeding out in his bedroom. The caller was Stephen, who truly had no idea what had happened to him, but understood that without immediate help, he would die. Fortunately, within minutes, paramedics and police arrived at the mansion and saw a horrifying scene. An elderly man sat in a chair covered in blood, holding the phone in one hand and trying to stem the blood flow from his abdomen with the other. They asked him if he had recently undergone surgery and if his stitches might have come apart, to which he responded negatively. Soon, Celeste and Christina appeared, seemingly unaware of what was happening, but they remained calm upon learning about the incident. They confirmed that Stephen had not undergone any surgeries, and he was taken to the hospital. This is where things got interesting, as it turned out that the businessman had been shot in the stomach while he slept. In his bedroom, police found a shotgun shell on the floor and sealed the room as a crime scene, declaring it an attempted murder. The first suspect was Mrs. Beard, but she claimed she was in another wing of the mansion at the time, and her daughters corroborated her story. Soon it was revealed that during her second stay in a psychiatric hospital, Celeste had met a woman named Tracy Tarleton, who was also a patient. They quickly developed a close relationship, and Celeste hinted that she would leave her husband if it weren't for him being a tyrant. Tracy took these words as a call to action and decided to remove the obstacle. Investigation, trial, and sentences. Tarleton didn't even try to hide. The shotgun she used was found in her home. Celeste vehemently denied her involvement, claiming that this woman was obsessed with her and acted alone. The accused chose to remain silent. Stephen survived, gradually recovered, and was soon discharged home. However, on January 22, 2000, he suddenly passed away due to a blood clot that had formed after the gunshot wound. Now, Tracy was no longer charged with attempted murder, but with the crime itself. Yet she remained silent until July of that same year, when the newly wealthy widow Celeste married Cole Johnson. Almost immediately after Celeste's fifth marriage, Tracy began testifying against her. She admitted her guilt in Stephen's death, but noted that she was driven to such a desperate act by her lover, who had promised they could be together after the man's demise. However, after eliminating her old husband with someone else's hands and inheriting his fortune, Celeste quickly married another man. Celeste denied all accusations against her, but everyone testified against her in court, even her own daughters, who confirmed that their mother never loved her fourth husband and wished him dead to inherit his wealth sooner. Tracy made a deal with the prosecution and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. She was released in August 2011. In the spring of 2003, Celeste Johnson was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole no earlier than 40 years. It was revealed that she also planned to get rid of Tarleton and was seeking a criminal to silence her lover and avoid punishment. When a friend turns into a ruthless criminal, you've probably heard the saying, "With friends like these, who needs enemies?" This is often said about those who only pretend to be good friends, but are ready to betray, set up, deceive, and even commit a crime against you at any moment. Such vile actions often hide some selfish motive, but their consequences can be utterly unpredictable, and the bitter disappointment in a close person who betrayed your trust is usually the least of the evils. The case of Sarah Stern shocked even veteran police officers with the cynicism and cold-bloodedness with which her closest friend, whom she had known since childhood and trusted implicitly, dealt with the unfortunate young woman. It was this friend with whom the student shared her future plans and a significant secret that no one else knew. By doing so, Sarah essentially signed her own death warrant, as from that moment until the tragic end, the young man lived with plans on how to make her disappear forever while remaining above suspicion. Surprisingly, this crime could have been prevented if those around had taken the perpetrator's words and actions more seriously. The criminal even laid out his plan on paper, presenting it as a script for a horror movie. But let's dissect this complex story from the beginning to understand what drove such a good friend. Who was Sarah Stern? Sarah Elizabeth Stern was born on March 24, 1997, in the small town of Neptune City in Monmouth County, New Jersey. She was the only and dearly beloved child in the simple family of Michael and Susan Stern. Due to health issues, Mrs. Stern couldn't have more children, so the parents poured all their love into their long-awaited daughter. Sarah grew up as an active, cheerful, and very sociable child. She performed on the school theater stage, was passionate about photography, drew well, and was involved in sports, competing for the local swimming team and playing softball. She dreamed of becoming an artist or designer and was preparing to apply to a local specialized college when a terrible tragedy struck her family. In the autumn of 2013, when 16-year-old Sarah had just graduated from high school and started college in the field of art she had dreamed of, her mother passed away. The woman had fought a long battle with cancer, and it seemed several times that the disease had receded, but the insidious illness returned with new force and ultimately won. This loss was a huge shock for the entire family, especially for the young girl who was always very close to her mother. For a while, Stern fell into depression, but she tried to support her father with whom she lived and who also had a hard time. They also lived with a dog named Buddy, whom the girl adored. Gradually, life began to improve. Sarah made plans for the future, and after graduating from college, she wanted to apply to a prestigious national university in New York. But before that, she dreamed of traveling the world, particularly planning to visit Canada and perhaps even live there for some time. The abandoned car. Michael Stern often had to travel out of state for work, sometimes for weeks at a stretch. But he never worried about leaving his daughter home alone because she was a grown, independent young woman and their town was considered quiet and safe. However, in December 2016, when he flew out for another business trip, trouble came knocking at his door. On the night of December 3rd, 2016, around 2:30 a.m., a call came into the police station from a concerned man reporting a car abandoned in the middle of the Belmar Bridge along Highway 35. The area was quite deserted, rarely traversed by anyone at night, making the solitary, empty vehicle immediately suspicious. The caller was a taxi driver, taking a shortcut home over the old bridge on the outskirts. He noticed the car parked by the side and stopped to see if anyone needed help. Finding the cabin empty and no one around, he called the police, suspecting the driver might have come here to end their life by jumping into the water below, a sadly not uncommon occurrence at this spot. Responding officers noted the keys left in the ignition. There were no signs of blood in the car, nor any signs of a struggle, leading to the initial theory that someone came to the bridge with the intention of voluntarily leaving this world by jumping into the river below. The next step was to find out who owned the abandoned old silver sedan. A database check revealed the car belonged to one Lily Stern, a senior American citizen who recently celebrated her 85th birthday. She lived in the same town, about 10 kilometers from where her car was found. Officers promptly visited Miss Stern's home to understand how and why the elderly woman's car ended up on the bridge at night. Lily was found at home, alive, well, and surprised by the police visit. She explained that due to poor eyesight, she hadn't driven for years. Instead, her 19-year-old granddaughter Sarah was the one who drove the car. Concerned, Lily immediately tried to call Sarah, but her phone was turned off. She then gave the officers her son's address, where he lived with Sarah, noting that only Sarah should be home since her father was away on a work trip and wouldn't be back until the next week. The mysteriously disappeared student. Sarah was not at home, and the back door to the house was found open, a worrying sign. An initial sweep by the police inside revealed nothing suspicious except for a dog whining locked in one of the bedrooms. There was no indication of any crime taking place. Belongings were in order, and there were no signs of struggle, bloodstains, or any evidence of an intruder's presence. By then, news of the situation had reached Michael Stern, and he was on his way home on the first available flight. The homeowner confirmed everything was in its place, and nothing was missing. Moreover, he stated that all of Sarah's personal belongings were also at home, including her passport, driver's license, and even her mobile phone, which she never parted with. The police shared their initial thoughts with Michael, suggesting his daughter might have gone to the bridge with the intention of jumping, and asked if he had noticed any signs of suicidal tendencies or self-harm attempts. Michael admitted that after his wife's passing, Sarah had gone through a period of depression, but with the support of family, friends, and her studies, she managed to recover. Furthermore, she had big plans for the future, dreaming of becoming a designer, wanting to travel and see the world. Nonetheless, on the night of December 3rd, the student vanished from her own home, and a few hours later, her car was found abandoned on the bridge. These were the established facts. Sarah was officially missing, and the investigation had to figure out who she was in contact with that day, what conversations she had, and who saw her last. Testimonies from the first witnesses. It soon came to light that on December 2nd, Sarah Stern had spent nearly the entire day with her best friend Liam Nakatasny, whom she had known since childhood. Liam turned out to be the last person who saw her, potentially shedding light on this mysterious case. Thus, law enforcement quickly decided to speak with him to gather details and try to reconstruct the events of that day. Upon arriving at the Nakatasny residence, police were met by Liam's mother, who informed them that her son was sleeping off a night shift. At the officer's request, she woke him up. Seemingly confused about the situation, Liam was surprised to learn about Sarah's disappearance. He confirmed that they had spent most of the previous day together and agreed to go to the police station to provide his statement. Liam shared that they had gone to college together in the morning, but decided to skip the last 2 lectures since it was Friday, and they wanted to relax. After class, they went back to her place, played video games, chatted, and shared their future plans. They left the house twice that day, once to grab food from a nearby fast food restaurant and another time to stop by a local supermarket. Around 7 in the evening, he left Sarah's house to head to his night shift at the 24-hour store and didn't see her after that. When asked if Sarah had been experiencing any psychological issues or other difficulties, Liam revealed quite a bit. He said that Sarah had been deeply depressed since her mother's passing, teetering between wanting to end it all or run away and start anew. He also mentioned that Sarah had had issues communicating with her father, struggling to find common ground. Liam didn't dismiss the possibility that Sarah might have taken her own life, but noted that shortly before disappearing, she had seriously considered moving to Canada and had even exchanged some money. His claim was confirmed by finding Canadian dollars in a bedside table drawer in Sarah's room, though the amount was so small it wouldn't have covered much. Another close friend and former classmate at Stearns, Preston Taylor, who had been her date to the high school prom and kept in touch after graduation, also gave a statement. He corroborated Liam's account, adding that Sarah was depressed and speculated that she either ran away to Canada or jumped off the bridge. By the end of the conversation, he was in tears, expressing how much Sarah meant to him, search for the body, questioning other witnesses. The theory of Sarah fleeing to Canada, or anywhere for that matter, was almost immediately dismissed since she couldn't have left the country without her passport. Law enforcement then focused on the grimmer theory and organized a massive search effort in the river. The search was complicated by the strong current in that area, which could quickly carry a body miles away from the bridge. Divers were deployed, special equipment was used, and police, along with hundreds of volunteers, scoured both banks of the river, looking for remains or any of Sarah's belongings. Among the volunteers actively participating in the search were also Liam and Preston. Unfortunately, despite all efforts, no trace of Sarah was found. Therefore, law enforcement decided to continue questioning people who knew her and were close to her. That's when a peculiar discrepancy emerged. According to friends and classmates, Sarah was not depressed. She was in great spirits, and none had heard about any problems with her father. On the contrary, she always spoke of him warmly and lovingly. However, after Sarah's disappearance, Liam and Preston behaved as if they had lost a close relative, garnering sympathy from many. But soon, people started to notice that their behavior was odd, as if they were performing for an audience. The two had become very close, but this development occurred about a month before the incident. Therefore, the police decided to take a closer look at the friends and re-interview them, the adopted brother of a wealthy heiress. When Liam was brought back to the station for further questioning, he appeared deeply distressed. The investigator inquired once more about his relationship with Sarah and Preston. Liam shared that the three of them grew up on the same street, attended the same school, and were closely knit, sharing their deepest secrets and dreams. Preston even took Sarah to the prom, but there were no romantic feelings between them. Liam mentioned that he and Sarah were not just friends. He considered her his sister. They even listed each other as siblings on their social media profiles. Sarah had no secrets from him, and she had told him that her mother had left her a significant amount of cash, most of which was kept in the safety deposit box.
Allegedly, Sarah didn't trust her father, who also claimed a right to the funds, so she stored the money in the bank, but planned to retrieve it soon to run away to Canada. When this story was relayed to Michael Stern, he was quite surprised and offered his version of events. According to him, his wife began saving money for their daughter's future, for education, a wedding, or a home, from the moment Sarah was born. The cash was kept at home, stored in a shoebox, with many bills being old and some quite worn, though no one thought much of it at the time. After his wife passed away, the father handed the box of money to Sarah, advising her to deposit the old and worn bills in the bank. Sarah followed his advice, depositing some of the money into her checking account for everyday expenses and renting a safety deposit box for the rest. She decided to use it to pay for university after finishing college and to travel the world. Michael sternly denied having any claim to the money for his own purposes. What is the best friend hiding? The revelation that the missing student had a large sum of money led investigators to consider the possibility that someone might have targeted her for financial gain. The investigation then decided to check her safety deposit box and bank transactions. It turned out that a few days before disappearing, Sarah had withdrawn a substantial amount from an ATM and had also visited the bank to take out some cash from her box. Another surprise awaited the detectives. Bank surveillance footage revealed that Sarah hadn't gone to the bank alone, but was accompanied by Liam, who obviously knew about Sarah's banking activities. They decided to question Liam again, specifically why he hadn't mentioned this bank visit, which occurred on December 1st. His hesitation was noticeable, but he explained that Sarah trusted no one but him and had asked him to accompany her to the bank because she was afraid to carry a large amount of cash back home. His explanation seemed logical, and his demeanor was natural. Moreover, it was discovered that a house across from the Stern residence had a security camera that captured the street and part of the neighbor's yard. Footage from this camera confirmed that Liam stayed at Sarah's house until 7 in the evening, then left for work and did not return, while the silver sedan left the garage around 11 at night. A plot straight out of a horror movie. About a month after the girl's disappearance, another acquaintance of hers named Anthony, who had been out of town for several weeks and was unaware of the events, walked into the police station with a bizarre and chilling story. It turned out Anthony had been in the same class with Sarah, Liam, and Preston, and after graduating, he dived deep into studying filmmaking, maintaining communication only with Liam, who also had an interest in cinema. Anthony recounted that about a month and a half before Sarah vanished, Liam visited him, and one evening they brainstormed ideas for a horror flick aimed at teenagers. Liam quickly came up with a story about a girl who secretly tells a friend about a large sum of money she possesses. The friend, after gaining her trust and learning all the details, strangles her and dumps her body in a turbulent river. Anthony liked the plot, and they even wrote a couple of pages of the script that evening. However, Anthony soon moved on to another project, forgot about the story, and then left town for a real film shoot where he was working as a camera assistant. Upon his return, Liam unexpectedly called him, inquiring if the police had visited him or summoned him for questioning. Surprised by such questions and learning of Sarah's disappearance and the circumstances surrounding it, Anthony decided to go to the police himself. A horrifying confession. After hearing the new witness's testimony, the authorities suggested Anthony draw Liam into an open conversation and try to elicit a confession from him. Anthony agreed, and a plan was devised. He would invite Liam to collaborate on a project that required renting professional camera equipment, which they ostensibly couldn't afford. Knowing the suspect's aspirations of being in a movie, it was likely he wouldn't miss such an opportunity and might offer the money he took from Sarah. Liam took the bait almost immediately, but suggested they meet in person to discuss the details. A hidden camera was installed in Anthony's car, and he was instructed to carefully coax a confession out of his friend. When the two met, and Liam got into Anthony's car, he looked around cautiously, as if afraid there might be someone else inside. He then handed over an envelope containing $2,000 in old bills, asking if it was enough to rent the filming equipment. Anthony nodded affirmatively, and then inquired where Liam got so much old currency. Liam hesitated, then admitted the money was Sarah's, which he and Preston had taken from her house because the dead don't need it. He didn't go into further details, but his admission was enough for the police to arrest him and Taylor on suspicion of crime. The accomplice's tale. Preston quickly started cooperating with the authorities, striking a deal with the prosecution. He claimed he did not participate in the act itself, but helped his friend cover up the evidence and dispose of the body. According to Preston, Liam began devising plans to take Sarah's money as soon as he learned of its existence. It turned out that Sarah had kept her inheritance a secret even from her best friend for a long time. But when she seriously started planning her trip to Canada, Liam inquired how she intended to fund it, prompting Sarah to reveal the money left by her mother. Liam convinced her that such a sum was safer in a home safe than a bank vault and insisted she withdraw the cash. He even borrowed a significant amount from her right before the tragedy, the same money she had withdrawn from the ATM. When Sarah's father was out of town on a business trip, Liam decided it was time to put his plan into action. He roped in Preston by promising him $25,000. McCrime decided to handle the dirty work himself, requiring his friend only to help him erase any traces. He convinced Sarah to withdraw the money, failing to check how much she took out. They spent the next day together, with Liam waiting for the right moment. He locked Sarah's dog in another room to prevent it from defending its owner. Approaching her from behind, he began to strangle her. However, the crime proved more challenging than expected. Firstly, the athletic and strong Sarah resisted fiercely, leading to a struggle until she lost consciousness. Secondly, just when he thought she had passed, she would show signs of life. It took the perpetrator about half an hour to be sure Sarah Stern was no longer breathing. Afterward, Liam left her house, heading to work, leaving Preston to step in. He snuck into Sarah's house through the back door, out of the camera's view, dragged the body to the garage, and tidied up the room. A couple of hours later,
Liam returned, took a small safe from Sarah's room, placed the body in the car, and drove off in such a way as to avoid being captured by the neighbor's camera. He headed to the bridge where Preston awaited in his own vehicle. Together, they disposed of the body in the river, wiped down the steering wheel, and drove away in Preston's car back to Liam's house to split the loot. They faced a huge disappointment as they found only $10,000 in the safe, not the $100,000 McAtasney had anticipated. However, they decided not to spend the old bills immediately to avoid suspicion. The accomplices buried the safe in a local park, spending only the money Sarah had withdrawn from her account. Trial and verdict. Despite Preston's confession, Liam McAtasney steadfastly denied any wrongdoing, attempting to shift the blame onto his friend. McAtasney's lawyer also insisted on his client's innocence, suggesting Taylor acted alone. Moreover, as the body was never found and the circumstances of the disappearance remained unclear, there was a lingering possibility that Sarah was still alive, having vanished without her documents, money, belongings, or phone. A search of Liam's house turned up nothing except a small key fitting the buried safe, identified by Preston. The trial lasted over 2 years, but despite the absence of a body and McAtasney's confessions, his guilt was established through the combination of evidence. The script described months before the incident, the key to the safe found in his home, his words captured in Anthony's car, and the old bills he handed over. Additionally, fingerprints of both Preston and Liam were found inside the safe, and a colleague testified that McAtasney was absent from work for a few hours that night, asking to be covered. Liam McAtasney was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. His accomplice, who did not directly participate in the act, received an 18-year sentence for obstruction of justice and hindering the investigation. Preston Taylor is eligible for parole no sooner than 15 years into his sentence. The body of college student Sarah Stern remains undiscovered to this day, the mysterious disappearance of Maya Millette. In January 2021, the city of Chula Vista, California, had not been quiet for days on end. During lunch, office workers shared city news with each other, and by late afternoon they consolidated what they'd heard over a family dinner. "Did you hear that?" they said. "A young woman, a mother of 3, has mysteriously disappeared." And each of them voiced their own versions of what had happened, but none of them wanted to be in her shoes personally. 40-year-old Maya Millette, a Filipino-American woman, disappeared from her own home on January 7, 2021. Outdoor surveillance cameras recorded Maya returning home around 5 p.m. The woman was not seen after that. The relatives of the missing woman, who were knocked down, stunned with grief, handed out leaflets with Maya's photos and hung posters around the city. Their concern was understandable. January 10th was the birthday of my eldest daughter. She would never for anything in the world would not miss this holiday, they said in one voice. As reported by the woman's relatives, the last time she got in touch with them was January 7th at 8:15 p.m. Dozens of volunteers and police officers went in search of Maya Millette. They searched the wooded area, nearby neighborhoods, creeks, and an abandoned golf course, but were unable to find anything. Larry Millette himself, the husband of the missing woman, never took part in the search for his wife. Moreover, after some time, he cut off all contact with her relatives. For a long time, the police assumed that Maya, having quarreled with her husband once again, decided to leave him. However, when she left the house, she could have been caught on the neighbor's CCTV camera, so she either did not leave the house, climbed out the window, or left the house in another way. What could be the reason for such strange behavior of a man? Maya, standing out among the others with her unusual beauty, probably had a lot of admirers, and maybe even more than one affair on the side. It is quite possible, without informing anyone, having lost her former feelings for her husband, she ran away from him, and not alone. Maybe that's why he was angry and didn't take action. Larry claimed, "I thought she was still alive because she voluntarily left our home at least twice in 2020 without saying goodbye to me or our 3 children. We prayed for her safety and well-being."
God gave Pablito and Noema Tabalanza 6 children. Maya was born as the 5th, since it was in May that the girl was born. Her parents gave her the name May. She succeeded everywhere. The purposeful character of the girl helped her in this. Thus, being in elementary school, she was in the top 5 students of her class. After the immigration of the family in March 1995 in the city of Honolulu, located in Hawaii, the girl entered the high school Retford, and there she began to show herself. She actively participated in various school and extracurricular activities, especially emphasizing the drama club and dance lessons. After graduating from high school with honors at the age of 17, Maya got a job at McDonald's, where she met her future husband, Larry Millett. A relationship developed between them. When Maya turned 19 years old, they got married. At the same time, the girl entered the University of Hawaii at Manoa, a land-grant state research university. Life was boiling for the young people. While Maya was studying at the university, her husband Larry was training in the Navy in Virginia. After a while, the couple decided to move to the city of Chula Vista, California. In order not to stop studying, Maya continued her studies at the University of San Diego. After graduating with honors, she took a job with the U.S. Navy as a civilian contract specialist. Where are those strange noises coming from? Maya thought. Am I going crazy already, and are they unreal? The phrases, "I love you," "love me," echoed through the house, slightly audible. Day and night they kept the young woman awake, haunting her in different places in the house. Maya's family didn't stop looking. They immediately hired a private detective. To maximize the attention of those who cared, the family repeatedly appealed to the public to help them in their search for her. On February 5th, 2021, the Chula Vista Police Department and the Millett family held a briefing to encourage as many people as possible to look for her. A short time later, skeletal remains were discovered in Orange County that were believed to be Maya Millett's, but this turned out not to be the case. It was then claimed that the remains belonged to a man. It was later proven that the remains were animal bones after all. On April 6, 2021, Maya's disappearance was broadcast on Good Morning America. The missing person case gained national interest in April 2021 when Maya's sister appeared on Dr. Phil's talk show to talk about the situation. Maya took all matters particularly seriously. Despite the fact that she came from a large family and loved children very much, she was in no hurry to have them. She didn't want to give birth until she and Larry had a steady, stable, high income. That's the American dream. After all, they had to provide their children with the best future imaginable. To make it happen, they had to work very hard and diligently. The right moment came in 2010. Then Maya and Larry had a daughter, Lara. In the wake of her a year later, another daughter, Milani, was born, and in 2016, the heir son, Lazarus Tristan. Maya was a great mother. She devoted all her free time to her children, giving all of herself. She attended all their school events, traveled with them in her SUV. There are some women whose children become the center of their universe. Wise, indulgent, caring. Maya was one of those women. By the end of 2020, the couple's relationship had become strained. Larry assumed that Maya had a lover. Her husband's jealousy knew no bounds, and if before she put up with these attacks, now she could barely tolerate it. Later, the DA's office would report that Maya had warned of Larry's capacity for anger. Just 2 days before his disappearance, police said, Maya texted a friend to end the marriage. "I told him I'm filing for divorce whether he likes it or not," she claimed. "I'm no longer trying to make peace for the sake of the kids." Larry controlled literally every move his wife made. At a frantic pace, the jealousy was escalating into sheer paranoia. Larry could go to her workplace at any time to make sure that Maya was not alone with another man. Larry was also pissed off by the fact that there were plenty of men on his wife's team. Larry once had the audacity to send an email to Maya's former boss, Derek Sopp, requesting that a male colleague be transferred to another division. He followed her practically around the clock, even got the kids involved in their squabbles. Larry once hid a child's cell phone in his spouse's car to track her movements. It got to the point where Larry was getting violent. He almost strangled Maya once. The couple separated, but not for long. In early 2020, Maya moved in with her brother, but rekindled her relationship with Larry after about 6 weeks. On August 12, 2020, Maya texted her brother JR, "He never lets me be alone. He checks all my emails, messages, messengers, Facebook posts. He even checks my app on Venmo. And then what happens? He just tightens the reins harder." Although Larry wasn't initially a suspect, police have taken a keen interest in his identity. Investigators contacted Maya's relatives, who said that shortly before the disappearance, the couple had gone camping and spent the entire time they were there fighting. Maya returned from the camping trip and told her family that if anything happened to her, Larry would be involved. According to the case file, Maya's friend told police that Maya made a different statement in December 2020. "I don't think he would hurt me, but I think he would hurt the kids to get back at me." Prosecutors say the mother of 3 did not explain further what she meant at the time. When we fall in love, for better or worse, we see the object of our adoration exclusively in a rosy light. Often we project our character traits and attitude to life onto our partner without noticing the red flags, so-called in psychology behavior, that may indicate the presence of an underlying problem or a potential threat to the well-being of the partner relationship. Abusers, manipulators, narcissists, aggressors, we justify them with deficiencies of upbringing, stress, but we should look deeper. Apparently, the nature is so laid down that families were created mostly in youth, when the whole world is presented in rose-colored glasses, so to speak, for a great, sometimes blind love, so that the human race did not stop. And after a while, having gained the necessary life experience, we see in a partner what was so carefully hidden from us at first glance. We think about re-educating, smoothing out all the sharp edges, to reconcile finally. But no, you can't change a grown man. It remains only not to give an outlet for his negative traits. This is the case with jealousy. If a person has certain traumatic events, paranoia is not far away. Returning to the sounds that Maya heard, one might guess that the woman had developed hallucinations amidst the stress of her family's troubles, but that was not the case. The situation took an unexpected turn. Maya remained sane, which is not the case with Larry. A police detective named Lorenzo Ruiz told the public the story of Larry's internet search, releasing screenshots of queries that included subconscious wife training and subconsciously training your wife to give pleasure. Unable to reach an amicable agreement, Larry began to influence Maya's subconscious mind by installing certain devices around the house that made this sound. Larry's cunning ruse was discovered by Maya. According to Matthew Grinley, an investigator with the San Diego County District Attorney's Office, in late 2020, Maya sent messages to Larry demanding that he stop playing such audio messages that negatively affect a person's mental health. This is a kind of influence that programs a person to perform certain actions. Maya heard these sounds every day. Maya's sister-in-law, named Genesis Tabalamza, later told investigators that Larry himself had independently recorded all these words and even confessed to Genesis about it. Who could have inspired Larry to do such a thing? Maybe the specifics of the job and the training he received during his service gave him the idea? The answer will shock many. The investigation found that between September 2020 and the time of Maya's disappearance, Larry sent more than 1,000 messages to various spellcasters and psychics. He purchased about 70 spell charms from them, spending more than $1,000. During a search of the home, police officers found a book titled Magical Love Spells. Larry was sending messages to similar witches and warlocks 1 time a day for sure. He asked for a spell to make Maya suffer some kind of physical injury that would make her unable to move around on her own, maybe become disabled in general, to be completely dependent on her husband. Larry thought that seeing his concern at such a time, and the fact that he had not abandoned her in her hour of need, Maya would appreciate his feelings for her. After all, he is such a good man. Here's what he wrote in his messages. "I would like a strong spell to bind my wife Maya Millet to me forever, to make her love me unconditionally as I love her. I hope you are able to cast a spell to cause bodily harm or maim, but not to kill." Looking at everything that was happening, at how Larry was gradually losing his mind, Maya was finally convinced of her intentions. In December 2020, Maya decided to divorce her husband. Every event in life, like actions, has an initial mechanism, a so-called trigger. Police believe that Larry's desperation to lose his beloved continued to grow by the day. On January 7th, the day authorities believe Maya contacted a divorce attorney, he was frantically trying to overturn my spouse's decision to file for divorce. "I'm shaking inside, ready to snap," he wrote to one of the spellers. Earlier in the day, Maya called a divorce lawyer. By the way, attorneys also reported that Maya strategized how she would serve Larry with divorce papers because she was concerned about his reaction. She considered going somewhere else, and then suing him, and even made a contingency plan to stay in a friend's vacant apartment. But Maya didn't want to leave her children behind, prosecutors reported. She did not want the children to be with the defendant when he found out she was seeking a divorce. Perhaps Larry's extreme behavior, triggered by jealousy of his spouse, can also be blamed on mental health issues the man had, but had been dormant for a long time. Or maybe he always behaved differently than other people, just Maya and Larry did not put out of the trash. Larry's behavior was becoming more and more like that of a psychopath. "Larry has a truly horrible temper," Maya wrote in a text message in June, according to the case file. In his own home, he created a small altar in the center of which he placed a joint photo with his spouse. Larry smeared the photo with his own blood and placed 4 candles around the edges. On January 23rd, police officers obtained a search warrant for the Millet family home. They found 16 firearms in the home that belonged to Larry. It was determined that 2 of the guns were in his possession illegally. 4 of the guns for which Larry had a license were missing. When asked by police officers where the weapons had disappeared to, the man explained that he had loaned them to his friend and uncle. In May 2021, Larry received a restraining order for the weapons, after which he had to surrender them to the authorities. This was justified by the fact that police found pictures of Larry's young son surrounded by guns in the house. It was possible that the children had access to it, so fearing for the possibility of them hurting themselves, the court ordered the order. The day after Maya's disappearance, at approximately 6:45 a.m., a neighbor's surveillance camera captured the Millet family's black SUV, a Lexus GX 460, driven by Larry. The man returned home at approximately 6 p.m. Where he had been all this time is not known. Another suspicious moment. The car was originally parked in such a way that the back of it was not in view of the neighbor's security cameras. As we remember from the beginning of this story, Maya's family was planning a birthday party for her oldest daughter on January 10th, 2021. So when Maya stopped answering calls and texts, one of her siblings traveled to Chula Vista to make sure everything was okay. When Maya's brother met with Larry, the latter told him that his wife had gone to one of her rooms the night before after their argument, locked herself in it, and was not talking to anyone. In the morning, Larry took his son to Solana Beach, a coastal town in San Diego County, and when he returned, Maya was still in the locked bedroom on the 2nd floor. On January 9th, Larry again told Maya's relatives the same story about the locked room, but no one believed him. The relatives demanded that Larry grant them access. When Maya's family entered the room, it was empty. Maya was nowhere to be found in the house. However, her car was parked outside the house. Only her credit card and driver's license were missing. After that, around midnight, Maya's older sister, Chris, filed a missing persons report with the police. It wasn't until January 15th, after his spouse missed his oldest daughter's 11th birthday, that Larry Millet said he was concerned about his wife's fate. In addition, on January 8th, the day after Maya disappeared, Larry did not text any of the psychics. And on January 9th, according to prosecutors, he asked a witch to lift all spells on Maya and cast spells on a man he believed Maya was having an affair with. It is clear that Maya was unlikely to have left her house, otherwise the security camera would have recorded it. On that unfortunate day, another strange thing happened. Larry and Maya's children were playing in the yard at about 10 p.m. This event did not go unnoticed by a neighbor of the Millet family. He was surprised by it, since it was late and cold outside. At 9:57 p.m., the neighbor's surveillance camera captured the sound of 9 loud bangs. Police speculated that they may well have been gunshots. After audio analysis of the video, police were unable to understand the nature of the sounds. Another coincidence that casts doubt on the man. Larry owned a huge gun collection,
including a .40 caliber Smith Wesson pistol, which police were unable to locate in the house, according to court documents. Billy Little, a junior attorney working with Maya's family to investigate the case, was able to uncover one incident that occurred 15 years ago, specifically on the evening of April 30th, 1997, in San Diego's Bay Terrace neighborhood. Maya met Larry Millett in high school after he moved to Hawaii from San Diego with his family. The move may have been prompted by Larry's arrest for a 1997 juvenile gang-related assault. I have reason to believe that he, Larry, was in a gang, the attorney argued. As a juvenile, Larry was arrested for a stabbing. The victim of the attack suffered multiple stab wounds and was rushed to Mercy Hospital, where he eventually recovered. As a rule, criminal records often find their echoes in adulthood. In an interview in January 2021, Larry admitted that he did have an argument with Maya in 2020. As of February 3, 2021, Larry stopped cooperating with the police. On July 22nd, Larry was officially named a suspect. Investigators assumed that the 41-year-old man killed his wife on the night of January 7th, ate, and then disposed of her body. In interviews, Larry told the same story that Maya's relatives had heard, about the argument in the room his wife had locked herself in. By a strange coincidence, his phone was turned off for about 11 hours on January 8th. Larry didn't show up for work that same day, and no one reliably knew exactly what he was doing. It was impossible to track his whereabouts. Too bad the neighbor's video surveillance camera is a mute witness to the events that unfolded and can't talk. The camera shows Larry driving his car up to the garage in such a way that the rear of the car is not in the frame. Larry may well have known which part the camera was capturing and positioned the car in a convenient manner. During this time, he could safely carry Maya's body through the garage and then, loading it into the trunk, drive away to dispose of it. Following his arrest, the man remained in custody and was held without bail. On October 19, 2021, Larry Millett was arrested for the murder of his wife Maya based on circumstantial evidence, and the children were given legal custody to his parents. To prevent further emotional trauma, the court barred Larry from having contact with his children. But the man violated that injunction more than once. He called his relatives, who gave him the opportunity to talk on the phone with his children. In total, he made more than 100 phone calls and talked to his children for more than 9 hours. According to prosecutors, during some of the calls, Larry made disparaging comments about Maya's family or asked for news headlines to be read to him. He asked an 11-year-old girl to have her and her 10-year-old sister watch a movie called Shot Caller, an R-rated movie that contains a warning, said Deputy District Attorney Christy Bowles. Essentially, it's a story about a businessman who goes to jail. Larry suggested that children watch it to see what kind of environment he was in. As a result of the court, Larry was stripped of all phone calls except for calling his attorney. However, as early as October 2022, Larry was granted permission to communicate with his children in writing. He was still prohibited from speaking with them through personal visits and the telephone. In order for the children to continue attending their current schools in Chula Vista, they were awarded custody to their paternal grandparents on October 19, 2021. Maya's sister also wanted custody of her nephews, but was denied. Maya's family was allowed to visit the children, but they still wanted to seek full custody of them through the court. The judge ordered Larry Millett's parents to facilitate maternal visitation with the family and work to obtain mental health services for the minors. When visiting the children, relatives are prohibited from discussing any details about ongoing criminal or probate cases with the children. Fairness. The children were left in the care of the parents of their mother's alleged killer, in a town where everything reminds them of the tragedy. Maybe the court should have sided with Maya's sister after all, giving custody to her. In June 2022, Larry's lawyer filed an appeal claiming the man was incompetent to stand trial, but after a psychiatric evaluation, Larry Millett was found competent. It is unlikely that an insane man could have been aware of his actions in cleaning up his tracks. When examining Larry's seized cell phone, it was found that all the text messages he wrote to his wife had been deleted. When asked where the correspondence had gone, Larry explained that he simply wanted to free up space on his phone. That's a strange answer, because the messages don't take up that much space on the device. During the trial, it turned out that Larry had withdrawn a large amount of money from his bank account. Perhaps with the money in hand, Larry was making plans to escape, or maybe he just wanted to move to another city, starting a new life with his children. Charged with murdering his wife and illegal possession of weapons, Larry Millett's trial is scheduled to take place in 2024. However, the trial has already been postponed and moved to other dates more than once. Could it be a matter of so-called circumstantial evidence? After all, circumstantial evidence is evidence that relies on an inference that connects it to a fact. For example, fingerprints at a crime scene. Direct evidence in turn supports the truth of a statement directly, that is, without the need for any additional evidence or inference. It is easy to get confused without the necessary legal skills and experience. In any case, the situation is unfolding before our eyes, picking up its pace. One thing is constant and tragic. The once prosperous, at least in appearance, family is destroyed. The mother has disappeared and is apparently dead. The father is in prison and apparently the perpetrator of the atrocity. The 3 children are left without parental love. 3 innocent souls, traumatized for life, left to live in a society that will remind them of what happened many times over, whether in reproach or out of pity, grieving the wound. The Lissi family tragedy. What drove a devoted family man to the brink? How can one identify a psychopath? Let's delve into what this term encompasses. Psychopathy is a personality disorder marked by distinctive traits such as a lack of empathy and compassion, emotional shallowness, egocentrism, and a deceitful charm. While not an exhaustive list, these qualities are commonly observed in psychopaths. Such individuals are adept at adapting, skillfully manipulating those around them, and expertly concealing their true nature, often to the extent that even those closest to them may not recognize the potential danger. The Lissi family's story serves as a chilling reminder that someone perceived as a loving and close family member can suddenly morph into a remorseless perpetrator, sparing not even their own children. The man's behavior and his stated motives for committing such a heinous act were so alarming and shocking that they raised questions about his sanity. Yet to everyone's astonishment, a psychiatric evaluation revealed that he was fully aware of his actions and had premeditated the horrific crime. This case shook Italy to its core, particularly the serene province of Mata Visconti, where this tragedy unfolded, marking it as the most notorious crime in the small Milanese suburb's history. Now let's methodically unravel this story and attempt to trace the sequence of events that led to such a tragic conclusion. The tragedy in Mata Visconti. In the early hours of Saturday, June 14, 2014, the quiet town of Mata Visconti was awakened by the desperate cries of a man. Peering out their windows, residents saw their neighbor, 31-year-old Carlo Lissi, calling for help. He appeared frightened and disoriented, mumbling incoherently and pleading for someone to call the police. As people from nearby homes gathered, Carlo revealed that his entire family had been victimized by intruders who had broken into their home, while he had miraculously survived because he was out with friends at a local sports bar, watching the soccer match between Italy and England. He mentioned that everything seemed normal when he left his house earlier that night, but upon returning, he found his home in disarray and the lifeless bodies of his 38-year-old wife, Christina, their 5-year-old daughter, and their 1.5-year-old son. Neighbors immediately called the police and emergency medical services. While waiting for them to arrive, the operator asked Carlo to check if any of his family members had a pulse and to possibly start CPR if there were any signs of life. To this, he screamed that he wouldn't step inside his house again or touch the bodies. While his behavior could be attributed to shock, it was peculiar that he referred to his family members as bodies even before confirming their demise. Carlo's odd behavior didn't stop there. When police and medical personnel arrived and confirmed the deaths of his wife and children, he barely reacted. He attempted to cry, but only managed contorted facial expressions, with his eyes remaining dry and his face almost indifferent. He struggled to recall the sequence of his actions, gave conflicting statements, but claimed to have recorded the moment he discovered the bodies on his phone's camera. He believed the recording would prove his innocence, but it turned out to be one of the main pieces of evidence against him, among many others. This was the beginning of a high-profile case that was quickly solved. The robbery narrative, strongly advocated by Lissy, was dismissed within hours of the investigation, and he became the prime suspect. As the police uncovered more physical evidence at the scene of the crime and interacted further with Carlo, doubts about his mental health began to emerge. Who was Christina Lissy? Let's start this narrative by introducing its main characters. Christina Lissy, born Christina Omas, came into the world on September 17, 1975, in the small northern Italian town of Pavia, becoming the eldest child in her family. From a young age, she exhibited a strong-willed, independent, and highly ambitious nature, always marching to the beat of her own drum. She possessed leadership qualities and was constantly striving to excel in whatever she undertook, whether it was her schoolwork, performances in the drama club, or any day-to-day activities. Christina was someone who always had a wide circle of friends, thanks to her excellent organizational skills and the ability to lead. After finishing high school, she was accepted into a prestigious university in Milan and soon moved out of her parents' home to start an independent life. Despite this, she maintained a close relationship with her family, staying in constant touch, and her parents knew they could always rely on their eldest daughter. At the age of 19, while still attending university, Christina took a job at a branch of a major Italian insurance company located in Mata Visconti. She quickly earned the respect of her superiors and colleagues, and her career was on a fast track to success. Upon graduation, she had a wide array of opportunities before her, but instead of moving to a big city, Omas chose to stay closer to home in the countryside. By this time, she had already received a promotion at work and assumed a managerial position, becoming a leading specialist in the field of civil insurance. However, even as she grew into an adult and a successful woman, Christina never gave up her youthful passion for theater. She dedicated all her spare time to rehearsals and performing on stage, particularly enjoying musical productions due to her strong voice and impeccable musical ear. In Mata Visconti, she had her admirers and was sometimes even recognized on the streets. Yet Christina's personal life didn't seem to fall into place as smoothly. She had many suitors and occasional romances, but most of the men she encountered seemed frivolous, unreliable, and unsuitable for a serious relationship or family life. She held on to the belief that she would eventually find her true love and achieve happiness. Carlo Lissy, the unassuming psychopath. Carlo Lissy entered the world in the fall of 1982 in the Italian commune of Casarano as the eldest of two sons in his family. The family patriarch held conservative views, was quite strict, and even harsh with his children. Carlo's younger brother quickly became the parents' darling, constantly pampered and protected, while they demanded unquestioning obedience, stellar academic performance, and high achievements from their firstborn. From childhood, Carlo strived to meet his parents' expectations, always acting as instructed. He excelled academically, participated in volleyball, a sport his father chose for him despite Carlo's passion for soccer, and never argued with his father, who often stated that his house operated solely on his rules. It was easy to upset or anger their father, who became terrifying when enraged, so Carlo made it a point never to contradict him, always enviously observing his father's and mother's more affectionate treatment towards his younger brother. As a teenager, Carlo became nervous and withdrawn, dreaming of doing something on his own, yet fearing his father's wrath. His fears, internal struggles, and self-doubt affected his relationships with peers. Carlo had almost no friends at school, where he was seen as an uninteresting nerd, often openly bullied without the ability to defend himself, as his father had crushed his self-esteem and suppressed any desire to assert himself. Over time, Carlo learned to adapt and blend in. He avoided conflicts, tried to merge with the crowd, and was superficially polite and kind, even to those he despised. It seemed Carlo had lost his own emotions, or perhaps never had them, laughing or mourning with others, but his emotional responses always remained shallow because he never truly felt those emotions. Another trait of Carlo was his skill in dodging uncomfortable questions. He wasn't a pathological liar, but knew how to prevaricate and evade with such an impassive demeanor that it seemed he was speaking the truth. People who knew Carlo personally later recalled his diminished capacity for empathy. He could be described as callous and indifferent to the troubles and sorrows of others, including those close to him. After finishing school, Lissi enrolled in a prestigious university's economics faculty, chosen by his father, despite Carlo's disinterest in economics or working with numbers. But his opinion was never sought, and he couldn't challenge his father's decision. Thus, Carlo was accustomed to acting against his own interests just to meet others' expectations. Carlo was quite handsome and knew how to use it to his advantage. His youthful sports activities and regular gym visits in adulthood made him even more attractive. Coupled with some charm and superficial charisma, Carlo could be described as a real looker with a dazzling smile and athletic build. People often admired his looks, leading to excessive self-love and clinical narcissism. Lissi easily initiated flings with women, but was incapable of engaging in serious, long-term relationships. First, he tried to avoid any responsibility. Second, he had no interest in making long-term plans, simply going with the flow. And third, his partner soon realized he was emotionally shallow and devoid of real attachment, leading them often to initiate the breakup. Even after university, the young man continued living with his parents, showing no desire to start an independent life, let alone a family of his own. Meanwhile, he secured a job at a leading IT company in Milan. Carlo earned a good salary and faced broad prospects, but remained dissatisfied with his career. However, his parents were overjoyed, and his father seemed proud of his eldest son for the first time, so Carlo was too afraid to disappoint him, preferring to avoid conflicts and criticism. But soon, a good job and career achievements weren't enough. His parents increasingly pressured him to marry and provide them with grandchildren. Aware of his numerous fleeting affairs and his inability to maintain serious relationships, these discussions often led to arguments at home. As Carlo always tried to avoid confrontations, he assured them he would soon find a wife and start a family. Carlo and Christina Lissi, a love story. Carlo first laid eyes on Christina during her performance in a musical play on stage, where he was utterly captivated by her powerful charisma and stunning vocal talent. Despite his immediate fascination, he lacked the courage to approach her after the show. However, fate intervened a few weeks later when mutual friends introduced them. At the time of their meeting, Carlo was only 23, while Christina had already turned 30. Despite the significant age difference, they quickly developed a romantic relationship. Christina, who had previously focused mainly on her career, found herself unexpectedly wanting to build a family and have children with Carlo. He was handsome, career-oriented, and intelligent. Christina perceived his hesitancy, dependency, noticeable selfishness, and some emotional coldness as traits that could be mended. She took the initiative in their relationship, with Carlo compliantly following her lead. Just a few months into the relationship, Omas introduced Carlo to her family. Christina's parents, however, were not pleased with her choice. They saw her suitor as frivolous, with Christina's mother describing him as a child in a man's body. She believed her daughter needed a more emotionally mature partner who could be a reliable support, not this immature young man. Christina, however, disagreed and decided to follow her heart, as she always had. Conversely, Carlo's parents were thrilled with his choice. Christina was seen as an adult, wise, self-sufficient, and accomplished woman who could take care of herself and their indecisive, somewhat irresponsible son. The head of the family, who was not easily pleased, was particularly delighted, convincing Carlo further that he had made the right decision. In quiet waters. About a year after meeting, the young couple moved in together and started actively planning their wedding. Carlo was quiet and compliant,
always listening to his fiancée, never contradicting her, and carefully avoiding domestic disputes. Christina made all the decisions while her chosen partner silently supported them. This arrangement suited her perfectly. She was confident that a long and happy life awaited them. However, just before their wedding, Carlo revealed his true nature for the first time, nearly causing them to split. Before the wedding, Carlo's friends threw him a bachelor party in one of Milan's popular nightclubs. They drank, had fun, and were having a great time when a group of women joined them. One of them showed a keen interest in the groom-to-be, trying her best to seduce him. His inebriated friends immediately egged him on, suggesting that a fleeting affair with the stranger would be the perfect adventure to bid farewell to his bachelor life. Without much thought, the guy went off to a hotel with the woman where they spent a passionate night. The next morning, unexpectedly, Carlo confessed his love to the casual lover and promised to leave his fiancée for her. That same day, he confessed everything to Christina, stating he had fallen for someone else and no longer wanted the wedding. Christina handled the news with dignity, packed her belongings, and decided to move back to her parents' house temporarily while finding her own place. But when Carlo's father learned about his son's actions and that the engagement with Christina was broken off by his initiative, he was furious. He declared he didn't want to see his heir until he apologized to the bride-to-be and convinced her to marry him again. Once again, Carlo submitted to his father's will. After buying a huge bouquet of flowers, he headed to the Omas residence. Christina's parents opposed him. They had disliked this peculiar young man even before the news of his infidelity and the broken engagement, and now they certainly didn't want to see him. But the final decision was Christina's to make. After some thought, she decided to forgive her fiancé and give him another chance. The wedding and Mr. Lissy's double life. The wedding took place as planned, and the money gifted by relatives was invested in buying their own home in Mata Visconti. Initially, their marital life seemed quite blissful. Both held high-ranking positions with substantial salaries, affording them not just the necessities, but also travel, entertainment, and more. In 2009, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Julia, and in 2013, Christina gave birth to a son, Gabriel. To the outside world, they appeared as a happy family, full of love and understanding. Carlo seemed to do everything to please his wife, not out of deep love or respect, but rather to avoid disputes. Christina was content with their life together, oblivious to the double life her husband led. At home, he was the exemplary family man, spending time with his wife and kids. Yet in Milan, where Carlo commuted daily for work, he transformed entirely. He frequently engaged in flings and casual encounters, meeting women in cafes, shopping centers, or even on the street. The handsome, stylishly dressed man in his expensive car almost always received reciprocated interest, but these affairs typically ended after a few dates. Carlo enjoyed the control and dominance in these short-term relationships, deciding when to see his next conquest and when to leave her. At home, Christina held the reins, with Carlo merely following her lead. However, rumors of his escapades eventually reached Christina. Each time she confronted him, Carlo swore it was all lies and slander. In 2013, shortly after the birth of their second child, Carlo seriously considered leaving his family for one of his mistresses, to the point of admitting his intentions to his wife. Christina countered with compelling arguments against their separation, particularly highlighting how it would upset his parents. Carlo had no choice but to concede to her reasoning, new love, and a horrific plan to escape marital ties. A year later, in early 2014, a new employee named Maria, young and attractive, joined Carlo's workplace. He fell for her instantly, unable to think of anyone else. He tried everything to catch her attention, giving small gifts, complimenting her, and asking her out repeatedly. However, Maria was clear about not wanting to engage with a married co-worker who had 2 children, but Carlo, persistent in his pursuit, seemed to ignore her protests and didn't think of giving up. Moreover,
Carlo began to blame his family for his unhappiness, believing his wife and children were obstacles to his personal joy. He convinced himself he had never been happy in his marriage, or in life for that matter. But with Maria, he imagined he could have the perfect relationship, if only he wasn't bound by his marital ties and responsibilities as a father. The more he dwelled on this thought, the darker his contemplations became. Carlo broached the subject of divorce again, but his wife once more convinced him it was a bad idea, and he found no arguments to counter hers. Frustrated, he started looking online for divorce lawyers, but realized after a few consultations that he would have to surrender half of his assets to Christina and also pay child support. Unwilling to accept such an outcome, he began researching how to end a person's life quickly and without arousing suspicion. Delving into various criminal stories, Carlo stumbled upon an article about an armed robbery that had occurred a few years prior in Mata Visconti. The robbers had fatally stabbed the homeowner before fleeing with the loot, remaining undetected to this day. A monstrous plan took shape in Carlo's mind to recreate a similar robbery scenario, but this time the intended victims would be the mother and children. The last day of the Lissi family. The last day for Christina and the children was Friday, June 13th, 2014. Carlo had the day off and spent it with his family, giving them a farewell party, so to speak. They went to an amusement park together, then went to the mall for shopping, and spent the evening at a popular local cafe. The man did his best to make sure that as many people as possible saw him and his family that day, and everyone noticed how happy they were. After returning home, the couple put the children to bed in their rooms on the second floor and went downstairs to the living room where they made love. It was part of Carlo's cunning plan to avert suspicion. He knew that the examination would establish the fact that he and Christina had consensual intimacy, and who would think that after that a man would suddenly take the life of his wife and children? The woman knew that her husband was going to watch soccer with friends and assumed that he went to get dressed, and she herself settled down in the living room at the TV. But Carlo at that time went to the kitchen, where he took a large knife and stealthily crept up to his wife from behind. He stabbed her in the side of the neck, but Christina not only remained conscious, but also rushed to escape. Apparently, she did not immediately realize who had attacked her, and when she turned around and saw her distraught husband with a knife in his hand, she was shocked. The victim tried to defend herself and dislodged the knife, causing the man's hand to slip and injuring his palm. Despite her efforts, the strength disparity was too great. Carlo continued his assault until Christina showed no signs of life. She died without understanding why her loved one could commit such a horrific act. Then, Carlo went upstairs and cut the throats of his sleeping 5-year-old daughter and his 18-month-old son. Experts later concluded that the children likely did not suffer and probably didn't even wake up. Neighbors, some of whom heard loud screams, did not call the police, thinking the noise quickly subsided. Had they been more vigilant, the children's lives might have been saved. After completing the deed, Carlo clumsily staged a robbery, slightly moving and scattering items, erased his fingerprints from the weapon, cleaned the floor where he had stepped in fresh blood, and then went to a rarely used basement shower to wash off the blood. However, he inexplicably put back on the same underwear, which had small blood splatters unnoticed by him in the moment of the attack. Following this, the perpetrator bandaged his cut hand, dressed up, and casually went to a sports bar to watch football and drink beer with friends. He behaved naturally, and his friends, later testifying in court, could not fathom that he had just committed a triple homicide against his own family. Towards the end of the match, Carlo sent a couple of messages to his wife's phone, updating her on the score and professing his love, adding that he would be home soon. He returned around 3 a.m. and staged a dramatic discovery of the crime, making several critical mistakes. Firstly, he recorded the scene on his phone's camera, intending to create an alibi by pretending to discover the disorder and then the body of his wife, before running outside in panic. His second mistake was failing to turn off the camera, resulting in footage that completely contradicted his alibi and testimony, Investigation and evidence. Carlo's initial claim of a robbery was quickly dismissed in the early hours of the investigation, following the crime scene examination. Doors and windows were intact, indicating that the perpetrator had unrestricted access to the house. Nothing of value, nor anything at all, was missing despite money and Christina's jewelry box being in plain sight. The disorder appeared staged, with items merely toppled or displaced rather than searched through. Most importantly, there was no logical reason for robbers to harm the children sleeping upstairs in their beds. Thus, the case was swiftly reclassified as a deliberate act of ending lives. Carlo, becoming the prime suspect immediately, gave inconsistent statements and couldn't clearly explain the fresh cut on his palm. When he was taken into custody and his clothing was sent for analysis, experts quickly found tiny blood splatters on them. However, Carlo claimed the blood must have come from when he attempted to revive his family members, yet the stains were too small and located on the back of his clothing, suggesting they could only have originated from the knife's motion during the act. Regarding the video Carlo provided to the authorities, it clearly showed that he didn't approach his wife's body to check for a pulse or go upstairs to the children, but ran outside immediately and didn't return. Despite this, he claimed his family was no longer alive and knew for certain all three were ended with a knife. The discovery of a bloodied cloth in the trash, which the culprit used to clean up, was the final piece of damning evidence. A psychopath, but is he sane? After the man was arrested, all his attempts to feign grief ceased. He became calm and unconcerned, and once in his cell, he simply went to sleep. Carlo felt no guilt or remorse, no pity for his own children or his wife, but he continued to insist on his own innocence, despite the fact that all the evidence was against him. A search history had been reconstructed on the killer's seized laptop, giving the investigation an insight into exactly when Lissy began planning to kill his family. There was now no doubt that it was a premeditated crime, but as yet the motive remained unclear. When the man realized that there was no point in denying, he began to confess, telling how exactly he got rid of his loved ones. But the answer to the main question shocked everyone. Explaining the motives for his action, he said that he could not just divorce Christine, because then they would have to share a lot of jointly acquired property, including the house, cars, and the family bank account. And he was not satisfied with this. In addition, there would be a burden in the form of 2 children who would have to pay child support. And all this, according to Carlo, would interfere with their happy life with Maria, for which, in fact, he decided to commit a crime. About all this, the murderer spoke quite calmly and indifferently. That he is a psychopath, no one has no doubt, but it was unclear whether this man is sane. The psychiatric examination established that Lissy was aware of his actions and fully realized what he was doing, but he did not feel any remorse either at the time of the crime or afterwards. In January 2015, Carlo was sentenced to life in prison. He listened to the judge's verdict indifferently, noting only that he thought so. Sometime later, the man tried to file an appeal, but soon withdrew it himself, saying that it was all useless. Finally, Lissy's father died of a heart attack shortly after his son was convicted and sent to prison. He simply could not accept the fact that he had raised a real monster, devoid of a sense of pity and remorse. Did you know that along with criminology, the science of crime, there is also victimology? This is a field of study that is at the intersection of criminology, psychology, and sociology, and deals with the study of crime victims. It turns out that there are certain predispositions of people to have a crime committed against them. These factors include social status, life experiences, and, of course, psychological characteristics. The worse the social conditions of life, the higher the risk of becoming a victim. At the same time, the higher the social status, the greater the chances of encountering fraud, extortion, and kidnapping. As far as personal experience is concerned, it is simple. People who know how to deal with their surroundings, circumstances are safer, unlike others. Personality traits are probably the defining condition in this list. What kind of character a person possesses determines his or her life position and, consequently, victimization.
The case that happened in 1995 in New York is about sacrifice and openness to the world, which became fatal for 21-year-old Kimberly Antonakos. The heroine of today's story is a beautiful girl with a good heart who could not have imagined even in a terrible dream what horror life has prepared her. Thomas Antonakos, a successful businessman and a wonderful father, learned about the disappearance of his daughter from her colleagues. The girl's co-workers contacted him when Kimberly failed to show up for work on the first spring day. She was very punctual and was in good standing with management, so her absence was considered a bad sign, and they were right. The assumption that the employee was ill was dispelled. The worried father also said that he had not been able to call Kim since last night and had a premonition of trouble. His girl was always in touch because he made her a rare and expensive gift for those times, a cell phone, but she didn't answer the phone, so the man was forced to contact her friends. However, they did not help him. No one has seen Kimberly since she left the party in the early morning hours of March 1st. The grieving father decided not to wait and went to the police. Only after learning that the young woman was wanted, law enforcement officials suggested waiting at least 24 hours. It is quite possible that she spent the night at someone's house and will soon make herself known. She was already an adult and could do what she wanted. This attitude to the case did not satisfy Thomas, so he organized his own investigation. Remarkably, but the light on the story of Kimberly's disappearance was shed by a psychic. A person with supernatural abilities was approached by the girl's mother. The woman flew from Florida as soon as she learned about what had happened. In despair, on the advice of a friend, she decided to use all possibilities. Psychic at the sight of the photo of Kim reported that she is still alive, but very weak and dehydrated. She also said that the girl was kidnapped by acquaintances and tried to escape more than once. Finally, she added that the deadly danger comes from several people, and the name of one of them begins with the letter J. Apparently, this is the ringleader of the gang. This information was later made public and caused not only a public outcry, but also unavoidable consequences. However, let's start at the beginning. Kimberly was born in 1974 in New York, USA. She was the only child in the family. Despite the fact that the girl grew up in love and affluence, she was not pampered. Her parents came from simple families. Nevertheless, her father Thomas managed to achieve considerable heights. He created his own company, which was engaged in computers. Earned funds, the man was happy to spend on his favorite daughter and her desires. When Kim was a little girl, the couple Antonakos divorced. The child was left to live with his mother. However, this did not weaken the connection between the little girl and her father. He took her on weekends and spent all his free time with her. When Kimberly's mother found a new man and decided to move to Florida, the girl faced a choice: to stay with her mother or with her father. Since she did not want to move and with her dad felt as wonderful as with her mom, the young lady preferred to live in familiar conditions. So Kim began living with her father, with whom she was very close. She grew up a well-mannered and sociable child. Over the years, she became a bright beauty. Her dazzling smile always lifted her spirits, and in general, she was distinguished by a sense of humor and positivity. Since childhood, she was surrounded by care, protected from trouble. Therefore, Kimberly saw only good in all people. Immediate problems bypassed her, in connection with which she was only heard about the dark side of life. Unfortunately, an open and kind soul brings a lot of sorrows to its owner. In 1994, the girl became a student at the College of Staten Island. A little later, she informed her father that she felt old enough to live independently. Undoubtedly, Mr. Antonakos was concerned about her decision, but respected it and decided not to oppose it. Then he promised himself to secure her separate living arrangements as much as possible. Therefore, Thomas purchased a nice apartment for his daughter in an affluent area of the city. He even equipped his daughter's dwelling with an alarm system. Not wanting her to park far from home, the man bought a space in the garage across the street. And to keep her in constant communication, she had a cell phone and a pager. Everything that was up to the father, he did to the highest standard. His concern for Kim's safety had good reason. It had to do with his affluence and the girl's little worldly experience. Kimberly not only did well in school, but also worked part-time. She refused her father's offer to continue the family business because she wanted to find her own way. So Kimberly took a part-time job as an accountant at a successful firm. At this time, she lived an ordinary student life, often entertained, attended parties. Her father repeatedly offered to return, but she refused. Her desire to be independent led to an unexpected denouement. In early 1995, Kimberly sheltered in her home friend Liz Pace and her family. Their apartment was being renovated. Out of the kindness of her heart, Kimberly offered her spacious lodging. The young people had fun. They cooked together and spent evenings together. On one such day, Kimberly and her friend decided to go to a party. The girls put on makeup, did their hair, and picked out suitable outfits, after which they went to the party. According to Liz, they had a good time. They had fun and danced. Afterwards, Kimberly drove them home in her white 1994 Honda Accord. However, she did not go up to the apartment, citing unfinished business. The girls embraced and never saw each other again. The first place Mr. Antonakos went to after the police was the parking lot next to his daughter's house. However, the car was missing from the garage. On the floor near the wall, the man noticed a shiny object. It turned out to be a small gold earring. The father remembered that he had given his daughter similar ones, and just in case he took them with him. Kimberly wasn't in the apartment either. He only came across guests, a friend, her boyfriend Joshua Torres, and their joint 2-year-old child. Thomas was aware of the decision, but was not in favor of it. The tenants were also surprised by the absence of the hostess and worried about her. Joshua reported that he was looking for Kimberly and volunteered to help. Later, Thomas came to the police station again. He stated that his daughter had had an accident, but the officers remained adamant. The unhappy father decided to communicate again with Liz, who was the last person to see Kim. The man showed the found jewelry. The girl confirmed that she had seen those earrings on Kim the night of the disappearance. Next, Mr. Antonakos visited the places where his daughter often went. There he talked to many people but did not learn anything important. Joshua, in turn, offered to look not only for Kimberly, but also for the car, which was very conspicuous. Then Thomas went to the police for the third time. This time, he was determined. Therefore, he informed the law enforcement officers that he would not go anywhere until they went on a search. One of the detectives responded to the appeal of the agitated father. He said that despite the protocol, he would take up the investigation. The first thing he did was to reconstruct the events of February 28th. Miss Antonakos went to college in the morning, then to work afterward. After working a few hours, she came home. There, together with friends, she had dinner and then attended a party with Liz. Around 4 a.m., the girls arrived home. After that, Jim went to the parking lot. What urgent business she had at such an early time, it was not possible to find out. In the apartment and garage of the missing was searched, but no evidence or traces indicating a struggle were found. No foreign fingerprints were found either. Either someone made an effort to clean them, or the intruder acted with gloves. The car and driver seemed to have vanished without a trace. The only concern was the earring that was found. The girl's bank account was also analyzed. It was found that the last time she used the bank card was the evening before her disappearance. Therefore, the theory of running away from home was ruled out. The detective's theory was that Kimberly had been kidnapped. At this point, other police officers joined the investigation. For lack of other solid leads, law enforcement unofficially adhered to the information that Mrs. Antonakos received from the psychic. By the way, it is not uncommon for authorities to cooperate with people who have psychic abilities. Sometimes such involvement has positive results, but it is simply not publicized en masse. Witness interviews followed. The first people interviewed were Liz and Joshua. Officers learned that 65 calls had been made from Kimberly's landline on the morning of March 1st. This surprised detectives. However, Joshua explained that he had been calling all of his friends and acquaintances, hoping to figure out where Kim had gone and why she hadn't spent the night at home. According to him, she was like a little sister to him. Thanks to Liz's testimony, it was possible to determine what clothes Kim was wearing. A portrait was drawn up, which was to be published. A distinctive note on the girl's body were tattoos. One of them was in the form of a scorpion, her zodiac sign. The other was located on the waist and represented an infinity sign in the form of two naked people. In parallel, there was a search for the missing car. Were checked all the scrapped metal collection points, as well as other places where the vehicle could be in order to disassemble for parts or sale. However, there was no positive result. A check of the girl's cell phone was also unsuccessful. Police officers told Thomas that he should have paid attention to the letters and phone calls he was receiving, as his daughter's kidnappers could have contacted him and offered a ransom. However, the Antonakos family remained in limbo until March 4th. Around 2 a.m., emergency services received a report of a fire. A large abandoned house was burning at 86 Woodhaven Avenue in Queens. Several fire crews were involved in putting it out. When the fire was finally extinguished, a charred body was found in the basement of the building. Forensic experts found out that the deceased was a woman of 25 years old. On her head survived a part of black long hair. There were also traces of tape. The poor woman's legs were bound and her hands were tied behind her back. However, the worst part of the story was something else. She was alive at the time of the fire, as evidenced by her smoke-filled lungs. In fact, the young woman was burned alive. Detectives hypothesized that the body found belonged to the missing Kimberly. However, dental records were needed for a full identification. At the same time, the ashes were inspected. The smell of gasoline could also be smelled in the air. It was obvious that the house had been set on fire. Apparently, someone had decided to destroy evidence of a serious crime, and indeed, there were no traces except for the charred body. Examining the charred corpse, the specialists also found tattoos matching the description of the missing woman. The records that came from the dental clinic confirmed the suspicions of the investigation. That's how Kimberly Antonakos' body was found. Later, other circumstances of the case became known. One of the eyewitnesses of the fire reported that he often walked with his dog. However, the pet had been behaving strangely in recent days. It was nervous and barked at the house. It was unclear what could have caused this reaction. After the fire and the discovery of the body, it became clear what so attracted the attention of the dog. The girl tried to free herself and called for help. With its acute hearing, the dog heard the sounds coming from the basement while they were inaccessible to human perception. When the officers questioned the owner, it turned out that he had visited the building more than once in recent days. The fact is that he put the house for sale and monitored its condition, and also picked up the mail and receipts. However, the man did not look into the basement, inspecting the house only from the outside. As the homeowner admitted, he never heard the suspicious noise, otherwise he would have paid attention to it. The man was clearly shocked by what happened. The investigators decided to question Joshua again, something they didn't like about the guy. In addition, by a strange coincidence, his name began with the letter J. This time, Joshua talked about the guy he hadn't reached the day Kimberly disappeared. It was a young man nicknamed Psycho, a Russian national who had once dated Kimberly. Detectives decided to verify the information. They determined that the Russian had moved to the United States with his parents as a young child. Having grown up, he became a member of a gang and repeatedly broke the law. So, in the case appeared the first suspect, who was soon detained. During the interrogation, Psycho became aware of the death of a former lover. However, his reaction shocked the detectives. The young man did not just claim that he was not involved in the crime. He was heartbroken. It was clear that he was experiencing genuine emotions. Investigators also wanted to see how he would behave at a crime scene, so they took him to the scene of the tragedy. There, everyone was convinced that they had the wrong man in custody. In addition, after some time, the guy's alibi was confirmed. Once again, the investigation was deadlocked. The victim's family decided to turn to the psychic once again. This time, the psychic said that she saw 4 people involved in the crime. She also said that the kidnappers wanted to establish contact, but they failed to do so. Allegedly, the kidnapping itself did not initially suggest a sad ending. "The denouement is coming soon," the fortune teller summarized. A couple days later, hoping to get some information, the missing woman's father announced a $10,000 reward to anyone who would help catch the culprit. Mr. Antonakos could not forget the words spoken by the clairvoyant. If he had been told earlier that he would rely on some fortune tellers and soothsayers, he would never have believed it. But grief makes a man suggestible. The man went over in his mind her words about her daughter's kidnappers wanting to get in touch. What did that mean, and what prevented them? Then he returned home and sat down at the table. He stared at his phone for a long time as he suddenly remembered a minor point. On the day Kimberly disappeared, he had listened to all the answering machine recordings, as he had been expecting his girl to contact him. However, there had been no voicemails, except perhaps 2 blank ones. When he turned them on, he heard nothing. There was dead silence on the other end of the handset, so he mistook them for some sort of device malfunction or communication problems. However, it later turned out that this was not the case. 5 days after the girl's body was discovered, officers managed to locate her car. It was parked in a fairly quiet area of town, not far from the crime scene. The investigation hoped to find fingerprints in the car. However, the vehicle was well washed. The only evidence was Kimberly's hair and the second earring in the passenger compartment. It seemed like a breakthrough in the investigation, but it did not happen. At the same time, Kimberly's father was being implicated in a local mob hit. Allegedly, such a rich and successful man was clearly connected with the criminal world. Some of the man's entourage even blamed him for the death of his daughter, as if his dark deeds had brought trouble on his daughter. The grief-stricken father denied any involvement. Detectives through their own channels managed to verify the information floating around. It was not confirmed. Thomas was clean and conducted his business openly. In July 1995, a young man was arrested by the police in a New York City home for burglary. Unexpectedly, he provided information concerning the case of Miss Antonakos. The detainee claimed that he had heard from an acquaintance that his friends had kidnapped and then burned the girl. When the officers heard the name of the unidentified man, the picture of the crime finally emerged. It was none other than Joshua Torres, the same guy who lived in Kimberly's apartment and helped in the search for her. Detectives decided to take a closer look at him. The young man was called back in for questioning. He denied any involvement in the crime. However, during a long conversation, he gave himself away. Torres said that if he had been the kidnapper, he would have fed Kim. Detectives latched onto that line, because there was no coverage of the victim dying of hunger, thirst, or cold. No one outside the investigation knew that, not even her father. However, they needed more evidence, and it didn't take them long. Officers looked into the identity of the new suspect. It was found that the guy had a criminal record and was repeatedly attracted. In addition, he did not work anywhere and lived at the expense of his roommate Liz. While the girl worked, he took care of the child. Having free time allowed him to plan the crime in peace. He knew Kimberly's routine, could track her down and hide her in an abandoned house. Then why didn't he demand a ransom? Something must have gone wrong, so the unsub got rid of Kim. The calls Torres made that morning were analyzed. It became obvious that the guy was lying when he said he was calling Kimberly's contacts. Most of the numbers belonged to random people with no connection to Kimberly. After examining his pager data, it was discovered that the guy had sent some strange messages on March 1st. The ring around Joshua was gradually closing. He had been suspicious to detectives for a long time. Finally, they got solid leads to apprehend him. They admitted to him that they no longer considered Kimberly's ex-boyfriend a suspect. And once again, they pressed the case intelligently. That's when Torres said he suspected his friends of massacring the girl. He pleaded guilty to accessory to kidnapping. At the same time, he said that he did not think that his comrades would eventually decide to get rid of a common friend. According to him, they just wanted to get the ransom and then let the victim go. But the plan didn't work. The kidnappers wondered why their calls went ignored by Mr. Antonakos. It turns out that they did make contact with Kimberly's father and even recorded a message to ransom her. However, the recording of the conversation was not saved on the answering machine for some reason. The kidnappers were angered by the father's inaction and decided to wait for further developments in the case. It turns out that they were frightened not only by the publicity, but also by the words of the clairvoyant that the suspect's name begins with the letter J. This information was not only published in the media, but also broadcast on TV with reference to an additional unofficial source of information. It's a mystical, vicious circle. One action spawned another. After speaking with the police, Joshua was released on bail and then disappeared. At the same time, his accomplice Jose was shot in the back of the head while walking with his wife. His wife later admitted to investigators that her husband did not trust Joshua, used a tape recorder when talking to him, and wanted to expose him. She claimed he felt guilty about kidnapping Kimberly, but he didn't set the house on fire, and soon wanted to confess everything to the police as he had confessed to her. Thanks to the pager messages and the suspect's statements, investigators established the details of the kidnapping and the crime. Thus it was found that 4 men were involved: Joshua Torres, Julio Negron, Jose Negron, Julio's namesake, and Nicholas Brett, nicknamed Jay. Notably, Julio dated Kimberly for a while and even wanted to marry her, but she rejected his proposal. The young people were united by the fact that they were friends and had a criminal past behind them. However, it did not compare to what the guys did to the poor girl. Nicholas had been released on bail shortly before the kidnapping. Thanks to his mother, he got off with a small fine for a crime that could have sentenced him to more than a year in prison. As for Joshua, at a young age he was involved in cases of child abduction, violence against a minor, illegal carrying of weapons. However, he too was limited to a light sentence for the acts committed. The initiator of the crime was undoubtedly him. It was Joshua who coordinated the group's actions. After Kimberly returned from the party, the men grabbed her in the parking lot. Apparently, they'd been following her and waiting for the perfect moment to leave her alone. A gun was used for intimidation. Kim resisted, so her hands were tied and her mouth, eyes, and even ears were covered with duct tape. After that, the bandits put the girl in the trunk and drove her to an abandoned house. There, they took the unfortunate woman to the basement and tied her to a chair. They even removed her shoes so that she would not attract attention to herself by tapping her feet. Before this, the young men told Kimberly that her father owed money and they would release her after he had paid them. Julio was supposed to look after the girl, bring her food and water twice a day, and make sure she was warm. However, he was afraid of the consequences and left the house. As it happened, the victim did not eat or drink for 3 days, and also froze from the cold. As soon as the abductee was left alone, the perpetrators informed Joshua. He made an audio recording in which he demanded $75,000 as ransom. Then the guy called the girl's father and left 2 messages, which later turned out to be empty, so they were not taken into account by Mr. Antimacos. The kidnappers waited for news and sincerely did not understand why Kim's father did not get in touch with them. During this time, Kimberly, left unattended, passed out from dehydration more than once.
But she was still fighting for life. The intruders were angry that they had not received the ransom, and they were afraid of being caught, so they decided to let her go. When they went down to the basement, they found the girl unconscious. Deciding that Kimberly was dead, they thought of nothing better than to get rid of all the evidence, and at the same time of the hostage. In talking to Liz, the officers discovered that Joshua had used his roommate as an alibi. He directed the actions of the accomplices while in the house with the child. Liz claimed that at first she did not even realize that her boyfriend had kidnapped Kimberly. Later at trial, Liz testified against him. She said that after the interrogation, Joshua came to her and confessed to everything. After that, he beat her and silenced her, threatened to kill her, and soon went on the run. Sometime later, the perpetrator was arrested. He was also suspected of killing Jose, however, there was no direct evidence of this. Investigators decided to confront the former friends. They informed them that Joshua denied his involvement in the massacre. When Julio learned about it, he cooperated with the investigation and told everything. This allowed Torres to be convicted of Kimberly's murder. As a result, the trio was charged with murder, arson, kidnapping, and holding a person against his will. During the trial, it was found that Joshua had repeatedly tried to mislead the investigation and avoid punishment. The jury deliberated for about 10 hours. In the end, Joshua Torres was sentenced to 58 years in prison. Nicholas Brett received the same sentence. Julio Negron was only found guilty of accessory after the fact. As such, he was sentenced to between 2 and 6 years in prison. Tomas Antonakos was satisfied with the verdict of the court. He did not want the criminals to be sentenced to death. In his opinion, it would have been the lightest punishment. It is known that Nicholas was repeatedly abused and assaulted in prison, and after 2 years in prison, he died of AIDS. Julio was released after 2 years, having served his sentence. Joshua will not be released until 2053 at the earliest, if he lives to see it. Sadly, in 2005, the victim's father died of cancer. His family is sure that the disease provoked the terrible death of his daughter. This is how unexpectedly cut short the life of a beautiful girl, Kimberly Antonakos. Whether excessive good-naturedness the cause of her premature departure, it is difficult to judge. However, if she had been more prudent and choosy in her surroundings, perhaps she would have lived a long and happy life. Good always triumphs over evil, even in a case like this. The trial that took place and life afterward set things right. The perpetrators of the tragedy are severely punished and are unlikely to ever forget what they have done.
In the spring of 2016, in the quiet town of Fort Worth, located in the state of Texas, there was a brutal and cynical murder that shocked even the most experienced investigators. The victim of the crime was a young mother of many children named Elizabeth Paula Arellano, who worked as a paramedic, and you will be shocked to learn who was her executioner. The circumstances of the tragedy were so strange that at first the police even put forward the theory that Elizabeth may have voluntarily passed away. However, such a theory did not fit with the testimony of people who became accidental witnesses of the terrible scene. The investigation had to do a lot of hard work to understand everything and send the criminal to the dock. However, given the brutality of the crime he committed, the sentence handed down seemed too lenient and unfair to many. Elizabeth Paula Arellano was born in 1987, August 16th, in the American city of Fort Worth, Texas, where she was destined to live all her short life. She grew up with her 2 sisters, Alessandra and Giovanna, with whom she was always practically inseparable. Elizabeth's birth father left the family when she was very young. He showed no interest in the fate of his daughter and did not contact her in any way. Soon her mother, Juanita, remarried to a man named Fidel, who adopted her children and treated them as his own. Elizabeth had a very warm relationship with her stepfather, who supported and helped her in everything. The girl studied diligently at school and dreamed of one day becoming a doctor. In high school, she met a guy named Rudolph Arellano, with whom she soon had a romantic relationship. The young man was almost 8 years older than her, which somewhat embarrassed Elizabeth's parents, but they did not interfere with their romance, because the chosen daughter seemed to them a man serious and quite reliable. At the age of 16 years, barely out of school, Elizabeth married her lover legally. The couple, one after another, had 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter. But despite the appearance of numerous heirs, Elizabeth did not intend to become a housewife. She remembered her childhood dream, so Elizabeth graduated from medical school and got a job as a paramedic, planning to get a higher education to become a doctor. The young woman was kind and pious, brought up in Christian traditions. She regularly took her children to church, instilling in them love and compassion for their neighbors. Family and friends characterized her as a very responsive person, always ready to help. From the outside, their marriage with Rudolph seemed strong and happy. But after 13 years of living together, this union began to literally crack at the seams. Rudolph had been jealous of his young wife before, trying to control her in everything, but over time his behavior became simply unbearable. In the spring of 2016, Elizabeth, after another jealousy scene organized by her husband, took the children and moved to the house of her parents. Rudolph made an attempt to reconcile with his wife, but the young woman was tired of tolerating his fits of anger. In addition, she did not want the children almost every day to listen to the parents' scandals. So she gathered her courage and officially filed for divorce. A few days after Elizabeth took the children and filed for divorce, she mysteriously disappeared. According to friends and family, she was in good spirits, and in order to distract herself from family problems and a little divorce, decided after work to go with colleagues to a local club. So on Friday evening, April 15th, 2016, the 28-year-old young mother in the company of her friends went to a fun place. There she danced and had a good time, but did not touch alcohol because she planned to get home in her own car, on which she arrived at the club. Elizabeth returned home well past midnight on April 16th. Having parked the car, she called her friend, with whom she had vacationed at the club that night, and told her that she had already reached home and that she was all right. Elizabeth then hung up the phone, but never entered the house. The next morning, her mother Juanita was very worried when she found her daughter was not home. She knew that Elizabeth was planning to spend the evening with friends, but her daughter should have returned long ago. She couldn't leave somewhere unannounced, and besides, her car was parked outside the house, which meant that Elizabeth had returned from the club. When Juanita approached the car, it turned out that it was not locked. The key was still sticking in the ignition, and inside on the seat were her daughter's purse and cell phone. Naturally, she couldn't leave her personal belongings in the open car like that, which meant that something terrible had happened. The woman immediately called the police, reporting a missing person. The police believed that they would be able to solve the case, as they call it, on hot tracks. In addition, there was still hope that Elizabeth was alive, because there was no blood or signs of struggle in the car. But it wasn't that simple. The first thing was to reconstruct in the smallest detail the chronology of the events of that evening and night, to trace Elizabeth's entire route, to find and question all possible witnesses. First, friends and colleagues of the young woman with whom she had spent the evening before her disappearance were interviewed. They gave the exact time when she went home, and later Elizabeth herself called back, saying that she had reached the place safely. In addition, several calls and messages from her ex-husband Rudolph Arellano, who had persistently tried to contact her that night, were found in the missing person's cell phone, but Elizabeth never answered him. Police officers went to Rudolph's house to find out where he was and what he was doing the previous evening and night. According to the man, he had been in contact with his ex-spouse just the night before, and she had promised that she would bring the children to him for the weekend. But afterward, she stopped answering the phone, and he thought she had changed her mind. As for an alibi, Arellano's alibi was questionable. According to him, he sat with a friend at a local bar that evening, and around midnight he returned to his home and went to bed. His friend and several other people who had been relaxing at the same establishment on Friday confirmed that Rudolph was indeed there, but where he went afterward, no one could say for sure. The man assured that he had gone home, but as he now lived alone, there was no one to confirm this. Thus, the police were not going to exclude Mr. Arellano from the list of suspects. Besides, he didn't seem upset or worried. It was clear that he and Elizabeth were in the process of divorce, but they had been married for many years. She was the mother of his children, and it was strange that her disappearance had not affected him in any way. On the night of the disappearance of a young mother, a fisherman called the emergency services to report a strange incident he had witnessed. The man said that he was sitting alone with a fishing rod on a bridge, which is part of an interstate highway, when about 4:30 o'clock in the morning, he noticed a car drive onto the bridge, stop, and then the driver pulled out something large that looked like a person and threw it into the water. It also appeared to him that something bulky and obviously heavy was tied to this person. Since the fisherman was at a great distance and it was still dark, he could not see details, nor could he see the make and number of the car. In addition, there was a strong wind on the bridge, so the man could not hear anything. Soon, another witness was found walking at night with his dog down by the bridge. He did not see what was happening on the bridge itself, but a heartbreaking scream caught his attention. Then he saw something large flying down from the bridge, followed by a splash and then silence. Based on the testimony of witnesses, the police decided to examine the bottom of the pond near the bridge. A few hours later, divers came across a body with a massive piece of concrete tied to its neck with a rope. The drowned woman turned out to be the missing Elizabeth Arellano. Had it not been for the testimony of a passerby and a fisherman, her body would probably have been discovered very soon or not found at all, because the tide weight did not allow the body to float. Then a version was put forward that the young woman decided to leave her life voluntarily against the background of problems in the family. But this assumption was untenable because it did not fit with the testimony of a witness who saw how someone threw her into the water, nor with the words of relatives, who assured that Elizabeth made great plans for life and would never do this to her children and parents. Elizabeth was still alive when a piece of concrete was tied to her neck and thrown off the bridge. This was evidenced by the forensic medical results, which showed that the young woman had suffocated, and by the testimony of a man who heard her desperate scream as she flew down the bridge. But who and for what reason could have so brutally massacred a mother of many children? Robbery was not considered because none of Elizabeth's belongings were taken. There were suggestions that the killer could have spotted Elizabeth in the club and then followed her home, or someone guarded her at home, waiting for her to return. The ex-husband of the deceased continued to insist that he was sleeping at his home on the night of the murder and had nothing to do with the crime. However, the investigators were still in no hurry to exclude Rudolph from the number of suspects because he had no alibi, and his behavior raised more and more questions. At the funeral, the man put on an act. He wept at the coffin of his ex-wife, saying that he would like to be in her place or die with her. According to his sister Elizabeth, she even believed in the sincerity of his words. In addition, Rudolph actively helped in the creation of a charitable foundation to raise funds for the ceremony of farewell to his wife. But after the funeral, when the man was once again called to testify, he already looked and behaved completely different, as if nothing bad had happened in his life. After a detailed examination of all the CCTV footage from the last route Elizabeth took, it was determined that a car of the same make and color as Rudolph's had driven away from her parents' house around 3 a.m. The neighbor also recalled seeing the car parked on the road near the deceased's house. Their neighbor also recalled seeing the car parked on the road not far from the deceased's house. Moreover, it was established that the car had subsequently driven towards the very bridge from which the woman had been thrown. This circumstance raised many questions, and when the investigation requested Rudolph's cell phone data on the night of the crime, the questions became even more. It turned out that the man made several calls that night, first near Elizabeth's place of work, and then near the home of his mother-in-law and father-in-law. He also sent his ex-wife several messages trying to find out when she would return, but his messages went unanswered. Apparently, he had been following her and eventually decided to wait for her return at Elizabeth's parents' house. The police finally had enough evidence to arrest Rudolph as the prime suspect and bring him to the station for further questioning. One of the key witnesses in the case was Elizabeth and Rudolph's eldest son. When the boy was shown the rope removed from his mother's neck, the son stated that he had seen it earlier in the backyard of his father's house and remembered it well because he had played with it. Moreover, the boy also recognized a piece of concrete that had been lying in their garden shortly before after the fence had been replaced. Also, small fragments of this concrete were found in the trunk of the car belonging to Rudolph. The investigation found that the man waited for his ex-wife at her parents' home and abducted her before she could enter the house. He forced her into his car, in the trunk of which he had already prepared rope and concrete. Afterward, he drove to the bridge for the massacre, expecting to go unnoticed. Rudolph Arellano was taken into custody 10 days after his ex-wife's body was recovered from the lake. Despite a large amount of evidence and witness testimony proving his guilt, Rudolph denied any involvement in the crime and continued to insist that he was at home that night. Given the brutality of his actions, Rudolph was facing the ultimate penalty of death. And then, on the advice of his lawyer, he decided to confess to everything and cooperate with the investigation to mitigate the sentence. It wasn't until January 2019 that Arellano pleaded guilty in court and detailed how he kidnapped and murdered his ex-wife and the mother of their 4 children. Juanita, who was in the courtroom listening to his story, fainted, and Alessandra and Giovanna called their sister's killer a monster. Rudolph himself, though he admitted his guilt, felt no remorse or pangs of conscience. He spoke indifferently and coldly about his murder, did not apologize, and did not explain the motive for his terrible act. The court sentenced the murderer to life in prison without parole. Elizabeth's family members, although they considered such a sentence rather mild, but noted that they forgive Rudolph because they do not want their hearts to boil with hatred. Her parents and sisters are now responsible for the upbringing of the deceased woman's children.